of these people. Of these people.
Oh gosh, we are live.
Yeah, we are live.
Welcome to the Geeky Gamer Podcast. This week, I have got a lot of noises going on in my head because I don't know why. All right, that needs to stop. I'm Ken Howl, and I'm here with Bill Bunkum, and we do this podcast every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time zone.
7-ish. Yeah.
It's exactly 7 o'clock right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my hands together, I think, and give a little prayer like we do at the beginning of every episode that we've ever done, and do our praise to the one true the one true God of I'm not really sure. I'm not great at this. This is a new experience. So
What a way to start.
bless us, oh thou in which we are standing. Anyway, this is the Geeky Gamer Podcast. I would like to thank our guest tonight, Shannon Lawrence, for being here. Super cool. We do this every week, and I would like to thank our Patreon people. So please join the Patreon, patreon.com/dreadlord. Thank you, Tim Roberts, Daniel Hulker, Nostalgic, and Natalia Cline. Couchfire Media, for some reason, decided they would do some weird shit to our opening sequence. So they did that. I don't know why they did that, but they did it. And we got Terrible Productions,
whoever they are,
bringing in the noise, the cloud, everything, the real, because that's it. So we're here. We're live. We started. That's it.
We are live.
There's
Pod match.
no more.
Pod match.
I feel very confident about being live right now. Very confident.
Yeah. I wrote this little ditty to introduce Shannon, based off of what she's about. So, entered the shadowed realms of terror and imagination, where Shannon Lawrence, author, thrives. Her laptop leaks ichor of horror and fantasy macabre tales, steeped in dread and wonder, have ensnarled readers in over 30 anthologies and magazines, including the upcoming book Myth Stalker, Wendigo Nights. I think that's the first time I've actually ever said that, and soon to be horror breakout. This is gonna scare the shit out of you. The business of short stories, writing, submitting, publishing, and marketing. When not lost in the fevered dance of the the creation or day job, Shannon journeys through the nightmarish, untamed lands of podcasting with her podcast Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem. blurs the beautiful with the deadly, treacherous, and jagged insights of audio peaks whispering arcane secrets. I caught their last episode, or one of their last episodes. It was about cults. It was creepy.
Yeah,
And very much enjoyed it. You can find out more information about her and her books, because there's like apparently a ton of them, at the warriormuse.com.
warriormuse.com.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you come with me and just introduce me different places. That would be fun.
Yeah,
Good.
Ken was like, "Hey, so I wrote an intro for her. You want to read it real quick?" And I read it, and I was like, "Goddamn, dude, that is an intro. That is an introduction.
Yes,
Well
it's
done,
good.
Ken."
I feel
So
like we
Ken,
need to step up our,
our introduction game.
Yeah.
Ken,
Absolutely.
let's introduce ourselves really quick. Who are you?
My name is Ken Howl, even though you probably won't find me on the internet on that name. I'm a journalist and a filmmaker and a role-playing gamer and a Geeky Gamer Podcaster and a writer and a director and a nonsense maker. And Bill, it's your turn.
Yeah, I'm a big nobody. Hey, Shannon, who are you? We've had your introduction, but we want it from your perspective too.
Yeah, I'd say by day, I'm a number cruncher, and then by night, I crunch everything else. But honestly, I'm all over the place. Sometimes, in terms of time, I go to bed at like 6 a.m. So that really doesn't apply. But
Nice.
there is no day.
Yes, that is right.
That's right. I wrote a lot of short stories. That's why there's so many books out there, and was having those in magazines and anthologies and all that good stuff. All mostly horror, but I've hit a few. I've done comedy. I've done mystery. I've done a little bit of sci-fi, but it was sci-fi comedy. All that good stuff. I enjoy it all. I like to get my fingers into everything, I guess. And so, thus, I also started a podcast on top of everything else, because who needs time? I don't need time. So, started out with a co-host during COVID. So,
Podcasting is extra.
oh, it is. I have a friend who
work.
does the Functional Nerds podcast. Yeah, he was a Hugo winner on a previous podcast he was on, and his advice was don't. When I said, "Hey, we're thinking about starting this podcast," and he said, "Don't do it," and yet I did.
Do you want to throw down the name to name drop?
Functional
Or no?
Nerds. Is
Or
that
just Functional Nerds?
Yeah, Functional
Right.
Nerds is
Yeah,
different.
it's Patrick Hester.
Hester. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Tracy. I
I
remember
pulled it
his
up
name.
for Sharon. You name dropped and we got it on there.
All right,
happening.
you're on it. Yeah.
Gosh, fire me.
That's good. 'Cause I've been on that one a couple times. So,
Nice.
but yeah, he was like, it takes a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of everything.
It does.
And he
It
was
does.
right?
Yeah. Do you say that you started your podcast over COVID?
Mhm.
Why?
Boredom. So,
Oh yeah, right.
before that, I was working for a local writers group, and I was putting on live events with my co-host. And suddenly, we weren't putting on live events. I had to get a crash course in Zoom real fast and figure out how to get us online and do all that. So that was an interesting learning experience. And I had started listening to My Favorite Murder, a podcast. It's a true crime podcast solely.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I said, we could do this. We were so used to hamming off each other. You know, when you're on stage, there's no editing. So we were used to that. But there is a learning curve switching to podcasting, even if you've performed live. So there's a lot of things, because you when you're on stage, you do fillers. But when you're editing a podcast, if there's an error or something, or you need a pause, you don't want fillers. You want that nice flat line to find and edit out. So little things like that.
What is
we
editing?
just were bored and we were going through withdrawal from human beings.
Sorry.
What is editing? Yeah.
What is editing? What I caught your last episode. How much effort do you put into the podcast? How much do you like? It was on cults, so do you just kind of spontaneously come up with this information to talk about, or do you kind of do research ahead of time? Because I think we're really fly by the seat of our pants right here.
We
do some research,
tons
but
of
but what do you
resources.
do? Because I was getting into this. I don't know why cults are fascinating. Do you think cults are scarier than monsters?
I think anything human is scarier than monsters, except for human monsters. So yeah, absolutely. Because it's just cults are fascinating. Serial killers are fascinating. Those are two of my big interests in it from a psychology standpoint, because that's something I'm interested in too. So it just broken human brains, really. And
do you have a favorite cult?
A favorite cult? I wouldn't say favorite. I did cover at Jonestown at one point, and that was a big one. And I actually listened to I think they call it the death tape, but I listened to the recording of him when he was live at the end, Jim Jones, because I felt like, I don't know, I wanted to experience that and listen. It's pretty horrifying. People are dying while this guy's just babbling. And yeah, I did research that and present on that, because it's disturbing. And because I like hitting things that are sayings. So I did one on the actual killing that inspired people to say going postal, for example. I did the one about my dingo ate my baby, for example, which Aussies do not like it when you joke about that.
No.
So of course, what Jim Jones was about drinking the Kool-Aid, which wasn't even Kool-Aid, it was Flavor-Aid. But it was no longer funny after I listened to that recording. I will tell you that, and did the research. But yeah, we do research. We each research our own piece. We don't discuss what we're doing ahead of time, so we don't have themed episodes. And the guest is free to talk about whatever they want. We always ask if you've got a story that's close to you for some reason, something you experienced personally, that's an even better story. Because that's how we started. That was one of my first episodes, was a personal story that came from a crime. So.
And did you solve the crime? Are you like a detective, or are you just interested in retelling the story of the crime? It sounds like it was personal. I mean, anytime a crime is personal, it's very it does add a layer of intensity. That what was the crime, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I was in the car with my mom when a serial killer came after her. His MO was to run a woman off the road. And of course be like, oh, darn, go up to exchange information or insurance information, or I can call somebody or something like that. But that was not his intention. And I was very little. I was only about 3, so I don't have a personal memory. But I grew up knowing this guy, who is in Oregon State Penitentiary. It is a solved crime. He was convicted of 3 murders. There were probably more.
Were you on the news?
Back then, I don't think so.
Because that story is familiar. I wonder if I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like straight up you were saying it and I was like, holy shit, I think I've heard this.
I don't think that hitting a woman's car to get her off the road is terribly uncommon. There was
I do it, but yeah.
That's how I meet women. That's right.
It's true. He's got a very large vehicle.
Sorry, continue. So what
No. I mean, that was the my mom managed to evade him because they were out in a rural area that she knew and he didn't. He'd followed her from bigger city, Salem, in Oregon, and she got enough ahead of him at one point that she was able to get off the road into somebody's driveway and hide and shut down her car. So that is how she evaded him. And I think his next murder was of a pizza delivery girl.
Wow.
Not the one he was aiming for, by the way, but one just happened to be working that night when they asked for the other one. That was the intentional kill. But she had known his older sister, when they were kids, and he'd spotted her leaving work, and that's how all of that started.
Oh, what a piece of shit.
Oh,
looks
yeah,
like
he
there's a
was-
number, but yeah, I mean,
Awful.
yeah. Or you could just go to a Trump rally or something.
Oh god.
Meet the same guy.
Oh, I'm sorry. No politics. We don't talk politics on the show.
Ken,
You know, that's what we say on our
loves-
podcast too, but it leaks, doesn't it? It leaks.
loves it. Oh, he loves it.
I'm just kidding. Golly. Gotta
So,
go protest in Charlottesville. It's terrible.
what's the
what to
personal
do.
crime we got down? Awesome. I've got a few questions,
actually,
but
I met.
yeah, Ken, continue.
I met the closest to a serial killer I was to Jeffrey Dahmer, and I met and interviewed the police officer, the arresting police officer, and that guy was a trip.
Bummer
I
or
just
the
wanted to-
officer?
The officer, the guy that arrested and stood by the door. I mean, I don't know if you've spent any time following up on Jeffrey Dahmer. I watched the show. It was pretty good. I mean, terrible. It was all terrible, but it was fascinating. And the way that the police officer, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the way he tells the story, it was just an intensely wild night. Whatever dysfunction goes into the action of someone who does that sort of thing, it's really incredible. Like there was a show Mind Hunter or something like that was really interesting, or it was like early days FBI or CIA. I'm really bad at recalling things, but like what makes a serial killer do what they do is certainly terrifying.
Yeah,
To say the least.
So Mindhunter is by John Douglas, and I know that because I got into those books by him when I got into serial killers as a teenager, which sprung from the whole we were in a car when what? So obviously as a teenager, that's really when people get into it anyway, but I kind of had that double reason. But it might interest you that on our episode that will be airing on March 15th, our guest was Pete Klismet. And he's a retired FBI profiler. So John Douglas is with the FBI, and he was taught by John Douglas. He went through the first class of that they created to train profilers and that. So it was an interesting conversation. He went over his first murder that he solved once he took that on.
And did you say, have you solved any murders?
Oh, I haven't solved anything. No, I will say I'm neither a crime solver nor a journalist. So I make it very clear on that podcast. I am not a journalist. I'm doing research on it, but I'm not interviewing, anybody, save a guest that we might have on. But
it's fascinating and compelling to tell a story. I have a tendency to railroad Bill sometimes. So I was going to say something, but I will.
No, please do. I'm eating a donut.
I feel like we can transition a little bit into set and setting, and we kind of discuss this a little bit. But so humans, scariest monster, scarier than like reality is scarier than fiction. So. What do you think that makes that set and setting, that reality, more scary? Or if you could maybe pick out what creates a scary monster, human or not, to you?
is that to me or to Bill?
To you.
He doesn't care what I have to say.
You're skipping railroading.
I speak over Bill all the time. Like, where do you find your monsters? I mean, you've written a number of books. I presume are they? And I haven't read any of them, so I've not gotten too deep in what they are. But I would like to know, like, are there monsters in your books? And if so, like what makes them scary?
I have a mix. I do have human monsters, and that tends to be more psychological horror, of course. And I think really what that plays up is, for example, an early story I wrote that I had published was Know Thy Neighbor. And it was inspired by, I used to go on many more, but I'm a late night walker. I go out in the middle of the night. I don't have a consistent time, so nobody stalking me can use that against me. But
right. I only go out during the day. I am never out at night.
That's right. But I don't want to run into people, so there we go. But there's always things that'll happen in the middle of the night and walking around. I live in Colorado Springs, so there's nothing flat here. There's no such thing as flat. So you got to walk up a hill, and I had this one guy walking up in the middle of the night, and suddenly this man just stands up from wherever he was at the top of the hill. I think he was like checking a sprinkler system or something, but there was that second of, what the hell is that?
Right.
Because he just kind of loomed up out of nowhere. I had no idea he was up there. And then another time I got accosted by a neighbor who I guess thought I was, I don't know, casing the neighborhood or something. So all these little things. And the whole thing is she runs into this neighbor and she kind of knows him on sight, and she sees him as friendly, and so he's harmless. And of course he's not harmless. So it's not really a spoiler. That's because things happen, and I won't spoil that. But stuff like that, it's the fact humans are scary, human monsters, because you can't look at somebody and know they're a human monster. Some of the more notorious criminals, serial killers, I mean, Ted Bundy's always the example, but honestly, Jeffrey Dahmer, do you know how many people still go, oh, he's good looking, he was a good looking guy, he looked harmless, he seemed harmless, he was absolutely the opposite of harmless. And so that, I think, is really what scares people and what to play off of in those stories is
like
you're
the fear of the unknown.
Well, yeah, and there was a story
something that can be safe,
where there was a kid or a young person where they had escaped from Jeffrey Dahmer, and the police brought him back to him.
Brought him back. That one kills me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about the scariest thing that a person can do. So yeah, it's disturbing. So is there the violence in your books? Is it kind of, or is it
what kind of violence is
emotional, or is it physical, or is it suspense?
I translate.
Yeah, thank you.
That is also a mix, and I will say that's because my books are collections of short stories for the most part. The new one is not; it's a novel. But so I get to play with so many different things. That's the beauty of writing short fiction, is that it's less of a time investment, and you get to just do so many things. So there is a mix of say gore and violence. I'm not an extreme horror author, so it doesn't get to that point, but there is some gore and there is some violence. And then sometimes it's purely psychological. So I've got Blue Sledge Blues is one of the ones I'm asked about the most. And it's the name of, I use that as the title story in one of the collections. It gets Blue Sledge Blues and Other Abominations. And it involves a porta potty type thing, one of those rest area toilets with the hole in the ground.
That looks like a fun place to go right there.
Yeah. Make that cover. My husband designs my covers, and he did that one for me. And that one obviously has gore and it has violence. And I set out doing it. It started out as just an exercise in like, what squick words can I put in here? Because people hate the word moist. So that's an obvious one. I was like, what could I do if I tried to write a story with some squick words in it? And then it just kind of went where it went. But
so they're called squick words?
Oh no, that's just me. I'm just making that up.
Oh, it's good. That's a good. That's a good coined term. I like that. A squick word.
Works, right? So
it's sort of an onomatopoeia style. Like it makes it's the mouth sound stuff, man.
Squidward.
Yeah, and so reading that one, I like to read that one if I'm at an actual horror crowd. versus, just some poor innocents at whatever other author reading there is. If I know I'm in a group that's really into horror, then I'll read that one. And that one is so fun to read out loud because everybody's reacting live when you're saying everything. Yeah. So.
Whoa.
That's the best I can do for that answer.
I've got a point of potential contention, which is my bread and my butter. Humans and monsters. All right, let's have some definitions right quick.
Okay.
Can you define a monster? Yeah. What's a monster?
Now, see, if you're talking about a human monster, it's somebody who we consider depraved, crazy, harmful to other people. And then if you're talking, that's where it really gets stretched, is a monster that's not human in a movie or a book or a story tends to be the other, right? It just tends to be a creature that's different than us. That can be a completely different thing in fantasy, where something like that wouldn't be considered necessarily a threat. And then in horror, though, it's usually going to be a threat unless that's the twist. But
yeah, so
I feel like it's a big representation of the other.
Is there a difference, and if so, what is that? Like, I know you just gave two different definitions, but I think that's actually the same thing. And what I'm pushing into is what is actually different.
Well, if we're talking horror, so I'm just going to go there instead of talking about fantasy creatures or something. I mean, if we're going there, it's a threat. It's something different from ourselves, and that would make a human monster and a monster the same thing, wouldn't it? It's a threat, and it's something different from us. I think that Uncanny Valley can come into play, and something that looks like us and is a threat. That's why that freaks us out. I mean, that's a biological caveman imperative right there.
Right. Like what? Did you see that movie Ex Machina, or Ex Machina, as some people?
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, I did see it.
That movie fucked with me, man. Like hardcore. I think it's supposed to fuck with you because you're seeing this thing that is absolutely not human, but it has a human face, right?
Yeah. Well, and going even further with that, though, even if you humanize something and don't give it a human face, it gets to you. And I'll bring up, say, Christine or Cujo by Stephen King, either of those. I mean, we've got a dog, and I feel bad for the dog like the whole way through. And I also, though, here's my thing with that, and this is why I connected to Ex Machina. Like, I felt for the car, Christine. Christine has emotions in that story, pretty much, right? Like, suddenly this car is humanized in this weird way, and so it's a step off from Uncanny Valley, but it's still enough that I'm like, listen, she's just defending her man.
So H.P. Lovecraft, not that I really like H.P. Lovecraft's writing. As a person, he's a piece of shit, but I do like his writing. And it seemed like and if you disagree, please tell me. It seemed like he wrote a lot about the idea of the fear of the unknown. Is that something that you resonate with? Is it something you use? Is it totally different? Go.
Yeah, fear of the unknown is huge because that's our lives, though. That's us not knowing what's going to hit us at any given moment, not knowing if we walk around a corner, what can happen to us. I think that absolutely resonates, and that's something to use. It's why I don't set many stories somewhere where people won't necessarily find themselves on a regular day. Because that's excuse me, if that's something like, say, if you're going to the grocery store, you feel like this is a normal, everyday, mundane thing and you're safe. What if it isn't? So it's really about asking that question. What if this normal thing that I do every day that I have no fear of, suddenly there's a reason I should fear it?
Yeah, I'm in an acting class out here, and I write some, and I'm attempting to write up this one scene, and I was sitting there trying to figure out, I had all these ideas, but the thought came up, what's the setting? My initial idea was a film noir, because it's just kind of cool and iconic and all these things, and a private eye, et cetera, et cetera. But I was sitting there thinking, I'm not a private eye, and
Mhm.
I've never lived in the 1920s. What the fuck am I talking about, right? And
Yeah.
I had this sort of mental game of, so how do you build out the setting? Obviously, putting someone in that sort of Dick Tracy, whatever. I know that's like later. I'm trying to think of the Star Trek, the Next Generation. What is it that Picard is always? He always goes into.
Oh, it's
I'm
not
losing
it's not a holodeck.
I,
It's
I'm losing my Star Trek card here.
yeah, you are.
Oh,
But
it's
I don't
Dixon
remember either.
something. It's Dixon something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, whatever. The point is, it's fun because you're like, oh, it's private eyes, or let's say you're going into horror. Oh, it's monsters and sort of these iconic things. But how do you choose, right? Like to do the mundane, to do something that's more iconic. You've written a lot. How do you do this? Yeah.
It depends on the story and what you're trying to speak to, that then you analyze. So if what I'm trying to get to in a specific story is this could happen to you anywhere, then that's going to tell me what I need to do with my setting. If it needs to be that the setting is kind of a character of its own, right? If you've gone to a haunted castle, that's a character in a way. And if you need that to play it up and to increase that suspense, or for it to play that big a part, then that's when you need to make sure that you've got that right setting. I've got, the middle of the woods is a big one for people. People feel unsafe in the woods. I love the woods, but a lot of people feel unsafe in the woods. So that's another one of those settings where it could be bright and sunny and you can see the blue sky through the green canopy, or there can be bare reaching branches. However you switch that up is going to describe that setting character.
Now, what about the voice that you're using and the verbiage?
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of these things are just, I will say I'm a pantser, or as they now call it, a discovery writer. So I really don't go in planning anything heavily. I don't go in with a plot predetermined. It just kind of flows with what's working with the mood at the time, whatever inspired me. So voice is tricky because that's one of those things that they say you really can't teach. you have one or you don't. But as far as the character's voice, that also makes a difference. Because you're hopefully you're in their head, because any character, I mean, as an actor, you have to do the same thing. You need the audience to engage with the character. That's the same thing writers are trying to do, especially in horror. If you don't care about somebody, you don't care if something's going to happen to them. Therefore, there's no tension, right? There's no suspense. So you have to very quickly, in short stories, introduce this character in such a way that people are going to start to care that they might be in danger soon. So that's kind of a tricky thing on its own, but there are little ways of making that happen. So I would think that would kind of help be something with acting too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, go on, Ken.
I was just gonna setting is so important, and like in a horror movie or in a book, I would imagine as well, having that setting not breaking away or breaking out of the seriousness of what's happening is so difficult. I would imagine on a page it's easier than, you're watching a film and an hour and a half in, you see the monster and it's totally revealing and the monster's bad, and then you're not scared anymore. So whereas if in a book or something like that, you have a lot more build, and I think you kind of spoke to this before with the words that you chose, and a lot of the imagery. Are you telling these stories that you write from? Are they first person? Do you get into the head of the killers? Do you try to tell their story ever?
That's another. It depends on the story. So again, I actually have more than 50 short stories out.
with the So how many short stories are in the Blue Sludge Blues and other abominations? It's how many? Like
I'd say probably about in the 13 or so range.
okay, so if we
13 to
picked
15.
one of the stories, and I don't unfortunately don't have one, but where with a striking character in it, like is like where can you pick one of the story and maybe speak to where you're telling the story from? Where are we hearing it from? Like,
Could you read your book real?
Yeah.
just read it.
Oh, look at this. And grab
Could
the
you
book.
just read this book?
I don't
this-
know, something that stands out. I don't know.
So I do have one. I've done one from the killer's point of view that was just a flash piece,
Mhm.
and by flash that's less than it's just a few hundred words. It's a story told in a few hundred words, and done that in his head stalking somebody, and the tension is built from you're aware of who he's stalking, you're seeing them through his eyes, you're starting to worry about this person, and part of what I played up with him was just his detachment from worrying about her, from being concerned about her as a human, and his excitement at what he's about to do. So, and for the life of me, I can't remember the title of it. I eventually that becomes
I
harder.
know what that's like. I've worked
Yeah.
on a lot of productions. I absolutely feel you. I can't remember everybody I've worked with or all the films that I worked on, so I get it.
You do reach a point where you're like, okay.
Yeah, but getting into that mindset as a writer, I mean, what was striking to you? What did you feel while telling their story?
Nothing.
That was something where I wanted to. So, I've said I'm interested in serial killers, and to be clear, I don't hold them in high regard or anything like that. I don't believe in
Let's hope
putting
not.
them on a pit, but there are people who do. That's the scary thing. And they're like, that's harmless. Well, okay, but I do not hold them, and that I'm not putting them on a pedestal. What I'm interested in is how a person can be like that. How can they think the way they think? How can they completely dehumanize another human being? And just look at them as a receptacle and something to do whatever they want to do to, a tool, something like that. And so that's what I wanted to do going into that story. Is I was like, what do they think when they're doing this? What is possibly running through their head? How do they justify this to themselves? So it was really just, I think that nobody who does not exist in that mindset can ever fully understand them. That includes FBI profilers, because you'd have to have something in your own brain that could get how somebody could do something like that. And obviously there are crimes where you can totally get behind what somebody did. Like, all right, that might not have been the right thing to do, but I can understand why that was what they needed to do in this instance. But that's not that kind of crime. So yeah, there's a part of me, I should say, and it could be, I am neurodivergent, and I've spent my life having to understand other people and just to be able to function, right? Like other people do, so that I can present the same sort of face to the public that they do. And so in that really twisty way, I want to understand them, not because I want to copy that, but there's a part of me who needs to understand how people can do something like this. And because at some point, maybe it can become less horrific, but it can't. And that's plain and simple. It will never be less horrific, what they're doing.
I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about this, but I was. The idea of, stories, monsters, putting oneself in another's shoes. There's this idea, that a monster is the other. Okay, let me ellipsis that really fast. Science fiction, which is not what we're talking about, but we could. Science fiction has a lot of horror in it. Someone described, I think it was my brother, described to me once what science fiction, in his opinion, what it was. And this was his definition. Well, I'm going to do I want to ask you, what is your definitions of science fiction really quick? We'll do that.
Science fiction.
Yeah, I'll get to a point really fast, but you know.
I mean,
it's gonna
bearing in
take forever.
mind that I don't
Yep.
write much of it or anything.
I don't
so
either.
growing up, science fiction, well, I was going to say it involves science in it. It tends to be, but the problem is that I tend to watch for science fiction a lot of stuff that involves space, right? That's
Yeah,
where
like
I
what?
tend to go, but that is not the full definition of science fiction.
No.
So somehow anything with space has kind of been wrapped in there because we view that as science, but so is going under the ocean.
Right.
Right.
Like the Nautilus and such.
Yeah. So anything having to do with something that we see as scientific aspects tends to be science fiction. I'm sure that I'm going to think of like something that counters
slew.
that. But yes. But in general, I would say that approaches it, which is interesting in the writing community and the sci-fi writing community. So there's an overarching speculative fiction, right? And that's fantasy, science fiction. And for whatever reason, horror has been lumped into that and is a little bit different. But
couldn't you see horror as you know, if you've got
it's certainly
a
speculation.
monster, like not a monster like human monster, but like a alien monster, or you know, that there's a technology like Freddy or a ghost or something like that from beyond the realms.
Yeah. So I mean, I get why it's there. It's just that horror tends to go to a con, whereas living on the outskirts of it, because it's kind of two different groups of audiences sometimes, or people. So, you know, but in writing circles, there's a lot of argument over, because there are people who are, we'll say, traditionalists who want hard science in all their sci-fi. And that is why I kind of struggle to have a definition, because a lot of people don't feel hard science has to be involved. And I think a lot of sci-fi doesn't have hard science in it. I mean, Terminator has science, but is it hard science? Do they ever actually say how anything really truly scientifically happened in a process? I mean, we get the origin because they go back in Terminator 2, but I wouldn't call it hard science fiction.
So the definition, I don't know if it's my brother or not, told me. I remembered it for this reason. It kind of threw me. They were like, science fiction is about humans. And I was like, okay, that's sort of a non-statement, right? Because everything is about humans. And he's like, no. What science fiction is doing is it's using the other to talk about humans. So whether you're doing hard science or soft science or whatever it is, the idea is always, for example, in Star Trek, the aliens are actually just humans. They're aspects of humanity. And this could be argued. It's a contentious statement. However, I do agree with it. And I'm going back into my monster mindset thing about how could a normal person put themselves in the shoe of another normal person, or an abnormal person, or what do you want to call it? Everything that's been created has been done by humans, right? There's nothing that's non-human when it comes to these thoughts and these stories and monsters and these ideas. It's all human, right? There's an argument that could potentially be made that it's impossible for us to fathom something that is not human, because we are human. Thoughts?
I mean, yeah, everything, any sort of fictional anything is being created from a human brain, period, right? And it's being created for the consumption by human brains. And just look at, what do we constantly do? We personify, right? Even animals. I already threw out Cujo and Christine, but we personify them to have a better understanding of them. How many people with pets haven't somehow personified or humanized their pets? They talk to their pets. They ascribe human emotions to their pets. And that's just how we as humans deal with life, I think. And we don't know how to look at anything any other way. And then we have these people who are divergent in that they don't even view other humans as human a lot of the time, right?
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And we have this idea that that's a good or a bad thing or whatever.
Right.
Which is in and of itself something to dig down into. Surely there's a science fiction that does. I would say Brave New World. I would call it science fiction, and I would say that it does.
Absolutely.
The idea of othering. I mean, you're looking at people and they have uses. They have their place in society, and the rules are different once you do that, right?
Yeah, and we have stuff like tribalism where we bunch into these little groups. I mean, we can use the simpler word of clique, but we bunch into these groups in this kind of self-preservation, lifting way, right? And by doing that, though, we create an other and we ascribe negative things to them and positive things to ourselves. And the only thing I can get from that is that it's self-protective, right? In some way, shape, or form. And so, yeah, I mean, we are also doing that to people all the time. And I don't want to go deep into politics and all of that. But we see that in politics a lot, especially right now, the dehumanizing of somebody who doesn't agree with you about it. And that's reaching really a peak. So we do it everywhere is what I'm saying.
There's, I don't know if this is because I have not read. Sorry, I'm giving you like the middle thought, not the beginning of the thought. So Beauty and the Beast, right? I have not read the original. I only know the different variants or some of the different variants of the story. Like, for example, the Disney version. But from what I understand, there's an element to it about this. I mean, it could just be about vanity. Maybe is it a Grimm's tale? Is that a Grimm's fairy tale?
Yeah, I don't think it's a happy ending. So
I think, yeah.
I actually don't know.
I don't know what the original Grimm ending is, though. I don't remember.
It's probably like, someone ends up in a stew. But yeah, the idea of, is the Beast actually a bad guy? This is probably like the Disney version that I'm just yelling at. But, Gaston, let's just talk about the Disney version. Gaston is obviously the monster, right? Mm-hmm. And the Beast is not the monster, and yet he will be the monster. First off, do you agree with that? And do you have anything to add? And then second, yeah, that's it. Do you agree or have anything to add or subtract from that statement?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I feel like that's a cautionary tale, right? Like, don't just assume that because Gaston is supposed to be attractive. He's charismatic. Everybody else wants him, apparently. And they will let him get away with anything he does. He can do whatever he wants. And he's actively this monster and they're looking the other way. And then we have this Beast who's stuck alone in the woods. I mean, he is a bit of a dick. Let's be honest here. He is a jerk. He's not the best in terms of a great relationship, but no, he's not the monster, but he looks like the monster. And obviously that's a message we've seen. I don't want to bring up contentious issues, but maybe we've seen it with, to use lesser ones, if somebody has a disease that shows on the outside externally, that it's not one of the hidden ones, how differently they're treated in society and how they can easily be isolated by other people.
Oh, sure.
And
out of fear,
Isn't that story really speaking to that sort of thing? Yeah. How we can turn against somebody who could be a perfectly good person because on the outside they look scary. And then here's this guy who's an absolutely awful person inside, but he's pretty outside, so he can do whatever he wants. And do we not see that all the time in real life too? I feel like we do.
I think that's why Saltburn was so successful as a film more recently. I feel like that's.
Let's not do spoilers. Let's not do spoilers.
Well, I don't. I think that, I think the reason why that film is successful is because people had anticipations. I'm not going to give away the ending, but it's a wonderful twist.
I am. This is what happened.
And I don't think we should. If you're gonna spoil things, I mean, you can spoil it, but let's make sure that Shannon doesn't.
Shannon, have you seen Saltburn?
I have.
Hey, chat, if you haven't seen Saltburn, you should probably, we might talk about it. Without divulging one of the 18 plot twists that's in that silly fucking movie. What were your opinions about it?
it was interesting because I saw a lot of conversations about it before I actually got to watch it, and I will say the horror community was deeply split on salt aspects of Saltburn about
Sure.
So I honestly haven't really thought through fully how I felt about it. I felt it was effective at what it was trying to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like a firework is effective at blowing up. It's like, oh yeah, okay, good, good job.
It was very Beauty and the Beast story, and I felt like that came across certainly in his mind, and it certainly broke its way into the nature of what we deal with here in America, which is people who are not good at being they're just not good. I don't know.
At society, they're just not good at society.
At society, yeah, they're not good at society. It's sort of incel culture. I'm glad we're not on Twitch because we just would have gotten banned for saying that. And to me, it's just a dark nature of not having empathy for your fellow creatures. But I guess that's a monster.
So when you're looking at that, and I can't remember character names, so we're just going to say the main character of Saltburn.
Sure. Yeah,
Are
pouty
you
face
viewing him?
McFuck. Yeah.
Yeah, him. Which character
Very,
are you viewing for that?
Very Keegan.
Barry Keegan. Barry Keegan.
Keegan Hand. He was playing a character, I guess, Oliver
Kogan.
Quick.
The chat is asking for your thoughts on Saltburn, by the way.
Mine?
Oh yeah, you're the guest.
Oh.
They don't care about mine.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, yeah, I mean, again, I thought it was effective. It certainly is twisty as fuck, right? And they have purposely, remember those squick words I mentioned earlier? They very intentionally did put in the squick factor, right?
Oh yeah.
They did some things because they knew it would have an impact on the audience. I mean, I'm not gonna name it, but because it's less impactful if we bring it
Did
up.
you call? Did you call any of them?
Did I call any of what he was gonna do?
So sitting in the theater, because I'm like super really smart, right? I was sitting in the theater, and like I felt that a lot of the things were foreshadowed, and I mean those. You call them squick, right? I really like that word. I'm gonna steal.
Yeah, it's a fun word.
Squick word. That's a coined word. You should totally coin it if you haven't. I feel like they foreshadowed those moments. Do you, or do you think that they were? What's your opinion on it?
Oh, I definitely feel like there was foreshadowing. I feel like you do have an idea pretty quickly once things start to happen of what we're looking at with this character. And sure, there's a little bit of doubt, if I'm remembering right. I've only watched it once, so it hasn't had a review, but
You'll need one.
I definitely think it's a movie you need to watch more than once. You watch it once, you get hit, you get slapped around a bit, right? That's what that first viewing is for, is to get in the face. And
Like
then
I've been to a funeral before. I understand what happens. I mean, that's this part of it.
I've been to those funerals.
That's what you do.
It's what you do. All right. Okay, I'm taking your word for it. I've never been at the site where they've done it.
I was like, get in there, man.
Yeah, they put the fun in funerals. That's
the fun at funerals.
There you go. That's another
Favorite
one.
part of the movie. What was your favorite part of the movie? Without going into the detail about like exactly what happens.
I'm just going to say in general, I like how twisty it was. I like how they pulled off the twists, and that it kind of keeps happening. And then we'll just say some of the stuff he did was so kind of reprehensible or repulsive to people that there were things near the end that I was like, oh, that's not nearly as bad as I thought you would do. Did you have that same at the end? Like, I was waiting for something to happen in at least one scene at the end, like, oh God, oh don't.
No, I lost my faith. I lost my faith in the movie. About 3/4 of the way through, I was like, oh, okay. I mean, like about halfway through, I was like, wait a minute. I mean, it got me several times. Yeah. But there was a point that I was like, okay, I think I get what they're doing. Well, I forget the director's name. Famous director. after watching Saltburn, I went and watched The Killing of a Sacred Deer. The only reason I know about any of these movies is because of my special lady friend, my girlfriend, and because she's super into horror and all these things. And we had a lot of conversations about it. My point, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, in my opinion, my humble opinion, far superior of a movie in literally every aspect. And I hadn't seen it before. The long and the short of it is, the movie in and of itself is attempting, like, as an object, the movie is a sour pill. The experience of the movie, right? And it's going meta in certain ways. Like there's in that movie, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, there's a point maybe 20 minutes in, I looked over and I was like, you've got Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman, like the Barry, whatever the fuck his name is, all these people who are amazing actors. What is going on with this dialogue? It sucks. And she kind of smiled at me and I was like, oh, the whole time you're supposed to be sitting there getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's masterful.
It's kind of, there's beauty to it, right? And so that's, boom, just kind of messing with your head there. And that's,
and I don't think art. They did in Saltburn. I don't think they got it. The very last scene was my favorite part.
I didn't feel like it either.
Did you either one of you catch Boxing Helena? I thought that was a really wonderful.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but
yeah, it's super long time.
What's it?
It was by it's about a guy. Don't want to give it away. Who was injured?
Whatever.
I mean, spoilers at this point on that one are probably more.
I don't care.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Who was injured and he's put in bed by this woman. He's put in bed by this woman, and she's supposedly taking care of him. And like as it goes on, she's removing body parts, she's making his world smaller.
Oh no! Oh no!
And I think there's a lot of meaning behind what the body part remover, and it's a heady thing. It's not grotesque necessarily, but it's kind of like, have you ever been set on by a person?
So this is horror, right?
Yeah, well, it's not scary, but it's scary.
It's psychological,
mentally.
A psychological horror. And this is the kind of shit that if I were to say what is pure horror, Shannon, please save me from myself here.
Oh no. Listen, I here's the thing about horror is that it covers a lot of things. And there are things that people will argue with you aren't horror, and they are in fact, because the whole thing about it's become very stuck into a box. And a lot of that, as much as I loved him growing up and reading all his stuff, a lot of it came down to people think if it is something Stephen King would have written, it's horror. And if it's not, it's not. And there was a debate on a horror thing the other day. I'm probably going to get totally sidetracked on this. On a horror site the other day where somebody did a questionnaire, basically. And they were like, if a movie doesn't have vampires or zombies, is it even horror? And the high percentage of people that said no is absolutely insane. And my thing is, again, psychological horror, there'll be a lot of people who say, no, that's a psychological thriller, and you have a fine line. But the fact is that horror is alive in all kinds of genres. We see it all the time in other things. Handmaid's Tale is hotly contested as being horror, but sorry, at least if you're a woman, it is absolutely horror.
I found that to be nearly unwatchable. It was so intense. I think we watched it during COVID, like highlighted COVID, and I was like, this is just too real.
It's rough.
It was hard. It was a hard watch.
Thing is, she took real life instances. So we'll say, for example, Iran, and how women went. If have you ever seen the pictures of when women were politicians and in positions of power? They're wearing what we as Americans would consider everyday clothing, and how that was all taken away from them. Atwood researched the places this had really happened. And so if you read the book, it is absolutely intense because the way she makes it happen. And a lot of us women are thinking, oh shit, right now. So look how easily it could happen if you have enough people with the right or wrong mindset to take everything away.
So what genre is that? Is that horror?
It depends who you ask. I feel it as aspects of horror at the very least. And it is on, I read it because it was on the top 100 horror list put out by a magazine. So
Sure.
absolutely people who think it's horror. I think it's horror, but there's a lot of people that don't. They can't just consider it.
We don't care about them. We care about your opinion.
I don't, but they can, yeah, it's absolutely horror, and
It's got very real violence
terrifying
in
and
it.
how insidious it is.
Yeah.
In the way it happens. So I just feel a lot of things have at the very least horror aspects, even if people don't want to agree they're horror. So really the definition as it comes down is that it elicits these negative emotions from you. So, and repulsion is one of those. That's why gore is a go-to in horror sometimes as well, because that has elicited this sense of repulsion in you. It's getting an emotional reaction, a negative emotional reaction from you. But there's fear, there's terror, and there's repulsion, and there's kind of like a little hot list of things like those words that can make up horror. But what it is it's supposed to kind of grab that reptile brain of yours and touch something subconscious that reaches your concerns.
Well, it's
So,
the gore is clearly the cartoon, and Handmaid's Tale drama. That is the horror that gets you where it hurts. So it's like if you put Texas Chainsaw Massacre up against the Handmaid's Tale, there's nothing in Texas Chainsaw Massacre that really gets me. It's like it's loud, it's over the top. I know we're talking.
Well, you're from Kentucky. I mean, it's kind of every.
I mean, it gets me, but we're almost immune to it. It
gets you in a different way, right? I mean, you go in there and you're going to have this crazy thrill ride, basically.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster of mayhem
and chainsaws.
Yeah.
I guess my point is like when you're writing, you don't have explosions and stuff like that. So set and setting is really important for horror to me, before you start breaking that fourth wall, which, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think probably goes down that road pretty deeply. I haven't seen much of them. I don't know the plot or the other than
it's close. The plot.
But I presume the plot. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of twists in that one. So
there aren't, and it plays up on kind of thing I try and stay away from myself because I feel like it's kind of punching down sometimes when we do the scary hillbilly or scary redneck. Like we're talking about people who are usually kind of disadvantaged but ignored for being disadvantaged in a way from other people.
Both Ken and I are hillbillies. It's perfectly fine.
It's true.
And you're okay with that. That's good.
Yeah. Real quick, could you define? I'm being a little obtuse here. Could you define punching down really fast?
Punching down. So yeah, people who are at a disadvantage as compared to the people mocking them, I would say.
Oh, I see. Okay.
If I'm a middle class individual and I'm making fun of somebody who is typically poor, right, living in poverty, maybe undereducated, that sort of thing, I consider that punching down a bit. I do.
I would argue the middle class is living in poverty.
Well, I will agree with you there, but I have a kid college bound next year, and I'm like, how does anybody do that? So
to not risk getting a little political,
yeah,
you're talking about people who are undereducated, but we're in a time now where that is a very real thing, where there's a lot of undereducated people and there's a lot of power behind that. So it's just like, and there's a flipped script saying, don't go to college, get a job, become a welder.
Well, don't go to college. It's useless, right?
Yeah. Don't go to college. Don't go into debt, work with your hands, do something,
Yeah, which might
that
be
is a trade.
completely flipping that, right? We're kind of seeing the rise of a certain subset of, I guess, hillbillies, we'll say. And then that means it's not punching down. So, but also, aren't we making fewer of those stories now? Which, because I'm just thinking they all seem to come out at the same time, and like Wrong Turn comes to mind. And The Hills Have, Hills Have Eyes?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Wrong Turn was kind of this resurgence of it because that was years later. So we had what? I'm going to say the 70s. Don't quote me on it. Where we have the Hills Have Eyes.
It looks like it's in the 70s.
Yeah, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff like that. And I would love, like, this is definitely not something I could do in this conversation, but yeah, I would want to see why did those types of movies start happening at one time? And I'm sure books were matching up with that. They tend to precede the movies. And then why was there the resurgence when there was? And why aren't we seeing it more when I feel like a lot of us are terrified of what people who fit into that subset are doing? Like, how delayed is that reaction, I guess, is my question for that.
That's interesting. It's interesting. And well, the thing is that it like you said, it plays on a trope. And I think that people are, it's hard to put things in context. That's why it's so important to do so, right? We've been putting things in context for a very short amount of time. Because, you know, like back in the day isn't that long ago. But we kind of act like there's always been film. There's always been, like, everyone's always read. There's always been social media, which obviously there hasn't. There's always been any information you could ever think of at your fingertips. But that's all nonsense. Where I'm going with this is, I don't know if we've gone long enough to where there's a cycle.
Right.
Right? Like, why were people scared?
The second time.
Why were people scared? Why were people scared of hillbillies in the 70s? Well, let me tell you, they're still scared of hillbillies. Because when you drive into Appalachia, you realize you are in a remote place that has a different culture. And I think someone went there and was like, holy shit. You know?
Isn't there a whole like non-horror movie that came out with, one of the redheaded actresses recently that got a lot of ire? And by recently, I'm saying last 5 years, I guess.
Oh, I don't know.
But yeah, it is like a different place, and you feel out of place if you go there, if you're not from somewhere like that.
I'm from Kentucky, and I'm out of place.
No.
Like, if I roll in there, they're like, who the fuck are you?
No, it's true.
Except they don't sound like that. They're like, deep down. And I'm like, oh, shit.
Colorado, I'm sure, has that as well.
I love y'all.
You go outside of the city. New York has that. Like, you go outside of the city and you go to a place where you're not really supposed to be, and people will make you feel it. Right,
you're alien. You're the alien at that point, right? You're
Absolutely.
the one being othered all of a sudden, and so you're othering back. So
and the same could be say if you're from the city or from the country and you go into the city, it's intense and it's a horror of a different kind. I mean,
the city in and of itself is a horror. Buckmud
I know friends who would live downtown and be perfectly happy completely living in that whole space, and then I'm just like complaining about finding parking.
Buckmud says The Handmaid's Tale is, in capitals, horrific.
It is
awesome.
Horrific.
Good. No, I've had arguments with people about it. So, like, and yes, my arguments have so far all been males telling me that it's not horror, and I'm like, cool. Like, I want you to read it again and think about your mom being in that situation, and then tell me again it's not horror. I guess. I don't know how else to get it through.
My question is, if males are telling you this, why aren't you just accepting?
And making them a sandwich for the troubles.
And that is in this story. White males right now. I mean, I don't want to go. I like it's.
Stop punching down on my people.
But here's the thing: speculative fiction. All speculative fiction tends to be a commentary on whatever's happening at the time, and that includes fantasy. And just like you said earlier, right? I mean, it's reflecting humans, even if it's an alien. And so it's sometimes hard to discuss horror without discussing hard issues too, right? So I get it.
But I mean, isn't that the point of horror, to make these issues easier to discuss? I mean, and that's where we get into the games and to the, when we do our role-playing game, like we want to talk about these hard issues sometimes just to work them through on our own, as an individual person. I'm sure that's the same with writing. You write about something that you need to work through, or you research something that you want to understand better.
Right. No, and that's true. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people feeling like they're being beat about the head. And I've seen movies where, or read books where I was like, yo, like, I know that there's always going to be messages in here, but could you bury it a little bit so that there's some entertainment too? And like, this isn't right, unpopular. A lot of people are split. Like, It Follows, I felt like I was being smacked around with a message, and I was like, I get it. But so there's always something like that. And for some people, it was amazing. And to them, it was telling the message just right. And we're all different. So I'm not going to hold it against somebody.
Yeah, but people can be wrong is the thing. Like, and I mean, that's the deal. People can actually be, can be stupid. People can be fucking stupid. People can be wrong. They can just be assholes. Like, and I know on a subjective thing, it's hard to say, to dictate, hey, look, here's who's right and who's right. Yeah. But I think allowing for it too, like, we can make declarative statements on what we believe and have some I don't know.
But it depends on the audience, right? But it's not like I'm not an opinionated person. But
I want to know your opinion about what Ken was talking about. Do you agree with him? About, like, Ken, you were talking about basically when someone's writing horror or just writing in general, but let's stick to horror. Maybe they're doing it to work through stuff. Hey, Shannon, why do you write?
It's not always to work through stuff, but it can be, right? So again, it's just, writing is a spectrum. Like all creation is a spectrum of things. Everybody comes at it for a different reason. There are people who insist that they did not put any messages into their stories, but people got messages out of them anyway. And so were they subconscious from the author, or were they something? I always find it fascinating because, okay, in high school, you have to analyze literature to pieces. And most of the stuff that our teacher is saying is the author had no intention of being there. So again, is it some subconscious part of the author, or is it just the subconscious of the people analyzing it? I aced lit once I figured out if I just bullshitted my way through and made up the most ridiculous things about what this piece was about. They were like, excellent. Yes, you really broke that apart. And I'm like, it was great fun. I actually enjoyed doing it, but I was really making something up at that point, just deriving it from whatever I was reading. But whether I believed that's what the author meant or not is a whole different message. And it's funny because each teacher had their own slant, right? I had a high school teacher who, I swear on all that is holy, anything was sexual. Or something where I don't even remember which piece of literature it was, but a spear gets chucked into a cave. He said it was sexual, and I was
absolutely
like, okay. And
it's the only reason you throw a spear into a cave
is that's right. It's got to be sexual. And what is that saying about all the parties involved? A spear and a cave. So once I had that keyed in, right, I was like, okay, then I know exactly how to analyze everything from here on out. And you can derive anything you want to out of something. But absolutely, you are going to see chunks of any author, whether they do it knowingly or not, you are going to see parts of their subconscious. Where that becomes problematic and people looking at it is horror authors get hit with this all the time. If you write this twisted thing, you must also be twisted. Right?
I think part of what was happening, just to step it back, is that English teachers, they want you to think out of the box. So I think that
and I did, so it worked.
Yeah. So it does matter though, and I'm sure that whatever it is that you came up with had a relevance and had a connection, because that was your connection. It was your. But I would like to reverse it again and say sexuality and horror and like there are tropes like if you have sex in a horror movie, you die, or any kind of sexuality in a horror movie is rape. Where are you in sexuality and horror? Like in science fiction, I think the as writers go, that's hot right now. Like literally.
Sex is hot.
Sex is hot in science fiction.
Did that go away for a while, or
is sex hot? Is sex hot in horror?
so are you aware that there is horror erotica?
I'm not.
Well, I knew there's
I'm not
horror.
unaware of it. You say it, and I say, aha.
Ah, they are tied together in a lot of ways. Not always. Obviously, there's plenty of stuff that has nothing to do with sex and horror, and plenty of stuff in sex that has nothing to do with horror. All right. Well, but I think that the big part of why they can be tied together so much is, again, what is horror doing? It's aiming for emotions. It's aiming for subconscious reactions. It's aiming for your lizard brain, again, not to abuse that. So it's trying to reach that part of you that you try and hide away from the world, that you push down, that you explain away. It's all of those things. It's trying to touch that. And so is, now I'm using touch a lot, and we're talking about sex, but it's
not yet.
Caress, please.
In terms, I mean, fear and passion, those things can be very easily wound together. And if you look at the way the body responds to things in terms of what starts working and what your brain is doing and what chemicals it's flushing through your body, a lot of those are going to be the same between those two. So, and then of course they're just, do you guys ever watch, if you have Shudder, Joe Bob Briggs' Last Drive-In?
I don't. Ooh. That sounds familiar. I don't have Shudder, but that sounds familiar. Tell us about it.
He used to do it on different channels and stuff too, way back in the day, and he's been revived on Shudder. And his whole thing is he brings movies that you would have expected to see at the drive-in. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be horror, but it has to be in kind of that family of things that would have been shown. And then he has commentary on it. So I like it. Of
that's
course,
cool.
I learn all kinds of things.
And what's it called again?
Joe Bob Briggs' Last Drive-In. And he does specials for holidays, and then in the summer he has it every week on there. Some people sign up for Shudder solely for that show and then cancel when he's done.
What show? What was the last movie you saw at the drive-in? And do you like the band at the drive-in?
We still have one in Pueblo, Colorado. It's about 40 minutes south of where I live, and it has been a few years now since I went. We used to, even when my kids were little, we were still going. So I don't know the last one, but the timing, trying to think of what the timing was around when we last went. Well, it was probably about 10 years ago or so. And they were getting everything. They'd have one screen with kids' movies. So it wasn't all horror or anything. But like we have that image from movies of horror movies, like schlock horror movies were big at the drive-in. That's what people like to see.
It came from outer space, or
Yes. It was that like fun, ridiculous horror.
Yeah.
We really don't make anymore much.
So Thriller.
I think that's
how it starts, right?
For sure.
Yeah, at the drive-in, aren't they?
Yeah, I want to say Michael Jackson's Thriller starts at the drive-in.
I think so. And I think it's a horror movie.
Yes. So the last memory that I have of one, I think I was a kid. We drove up and there was like this huge, like it was a speaker, but it almost looked like a microphone. And you hung that on the thing, and it was like on a post. It was forever ago. I remember being a kid and being like, "This sucks."
The sound is all scratchy.
A cinema's way better than this.
I think the last one I went, like they had a radio channel or two, and they would just broadcast it on the radio. The last film I saw, and it was when it was new, was Naked Gun. I believe. And
They're remaking that apparently.
Are they?
Yeah. What were we saying, Shannon?
Oh, sorry. I think that was what would that be? Early 90s?
Oh man,
early 90s.
I don't know. What was the dude's name? It's not Lawrence.
Leslie.
It's Yeah,
Nielsen.
Leslie Nielsen.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they're remaking it, I think, with Liam Neeson. Another L name. Fuck.
Yeah,
Really?
Leslie
Okay.
Nielsen.
Yeah.
I do remember, and this wasn't the last one I saw, seeing Arachnophobia at the drive-in because my mom is arachnophobic, so that was a hell of an experience, let me tell
nice.
you. You didn't know what was playing that night.
So
That went so bad.
So I have several questions. We'll see if Ken lets me get through them.
Nope.
So, true crime. How awful do I want to be? You probably know where I'm going to go with this. You probably know where I'm going to go with this. Maybe you do. I'm a white man. I suppose. I'm a heterosexual white man.
I think that's
Right in
What's
that
up?
age range.
What's up with women into true crime? Now, first of all, caveat. It's not first of all. Second of all, caveat. I'm into it too, obviously. However, there is a stereotype that people of the millennial era, I don't know how old you are, I'm not going to ask, although I'm passive-aggressively saying, of the millennial era are into true crime. So dispel these stereotypes or go into the... Go. Tell us.
Right. Here's the thing. It is a stereotype probably for a good reason. And there's people discuss it. I'm not a millennial. So
Oh, you're not. You're
yeah,
not.
I have no problem with I'm a Gen Xer. So
Oh,
yeah. There's
okay.
only one millennial on here, and it's that guy.
that guy right there. Yeah. My siblings are all millennials. So
I
I'm
see.
the oldest of 5 and there was a gap and
I see. I understand. Fine.
No. Okay, but so yes, here's kind of a theory. I can't tell you with any real scientific basis why it is, but I'll tell you. So I grew up in a high crime area, several high crime areas before I came to Colorado, and when I was in elementary school, I was not allowed to go to the bathroom by myself. We had to wait until a group could go, because danger in the elementary school was not safe. And
Danger.
we learned from they taught the girls from an early age basically self-defense things and things not to do to draw attention to yourself, and meeting the eyes of somebody so they know you're paying attention, not looking at the ground when you're walking. I was learning this stuff in elementary school in an effort to keep us safe, and I did have a guy try and kidnap me when I was walking to my bus stop. He tried to get me into his car. I booked it and ran, and thank goodness their door was unlocked. I ran to the nearest house. I didn't knock. I turned that knob and went in.
Where'd
they
you
never
live?
knew I was there.
Where were you?
So I was living in Maryland at the time.
Maryland sucks.
Yeah. It was not safe I was about 15. I've mapped it since then because I was curious. I was young.
Sure.
I moved from there when I was 12. And the city I used to live in has been advertised as a safe city to live in now. And I mapped it. It's 15 minutes outside Baltimore, if that tells you anything.
Oh, dude.
So that leaked, I guess. I don't know. And I don't know if it really is safer now or if they've just done some things to bury stuff. I have no idea. But I had seen and dealt with a lot of things, flashers, and two separate flashers I could tell you about there. And so, yeah, it was constantly being drummed into us that it was our responsibility to keep ourselves safe, and we were to make ourselves small but big, and we were to defend ourselves, and how are we supposed to dress, and all of this stuff. And that is what women grow up under. And yes, anybody can be, this is a big argument I see online, men can be in danger in public too. You're absolutely correct. But
don't worry about the disclaimers. Just go.
There are different risks for women, and they start at a young age. And we're constantly trained that if you slip up, you're going to get yourself into this situation. And I think that has us already tuned in and wanting to know more about these situations that we've been hit in the face with since we were young. And it's just such a normal part of growing up for us to be given those defensive things. And
it's like cultural almost.
you should see just for a while there, if I said I'd gone for a walk at 2 a.m. or something like that, and people were like, "That's not safe. You shouldn't have done that." And I'm like, "Would you?"
Well,
say that to a man?
when you said that like earlier, when you were like, "Oh yeah, I walk at night," I was like,
You had a visceral,
Well,
right? Like,
I walk at night.
"Yeah,
I've
but
been
you're
walking at night.
a dude."
But I'm 6 feet tall, and I walk
He's
about
like 6'5".
15 miles.
He says he's 6 feet. He's 6'5".
I walk about 15 miles an hour. So like, you know, I kind of get my presence up a little bit. I don't walk through groups. I mean, I'm smart about it, but I used to walk in LA when I lived there.
right? I don't wear headphones. I wouldn't do, like you need to be able to hear, you need to be able to be defensive.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was always like, do you ask dudes why they walk at 2 o'clock in the morning, or was it just me that should be not allowed to? And I was like,
oh my god.
Yeah. So it's that sort of thing. I think it just kind of keys us into true crime in a different way, because in a way we've been brought up on aspects of true crime. This could happen to you. Here's what you do to avoid it.
My partner does not like it when I go walking out downtown. She's not a fan. She's like, I don't want you to walk around. Even Bill is like, when we've gone out drinking or something, he's like, let me give you a ride home. It's like, well, it's cold, but a lot of times I just want to walk. So I mean, I think that there's a wonderful headspace out there. I think it's pretty safe. I mean, people get shot sometimes, but typically by people they know.
Sucks.
For the most part, I'm sure when you go out walking, you don't see anybody at all.
I don't see many people. I'm more likely to I walk somewhere where I'm less likely to have cars drive by, but I am more likely to have somebody drive by than walk by.
Sure.
For example.
What do you... Go on.
How much mace do you have? How many guns do you have?
Yeah. That was exactly my question.
I will say that I do walk with items of self-defense on my person. Yeah. Yes.
Sure. Good.
But at the same time, I'm also going to fight like hell. And again, when I was like 9 years old, I got away from a dude trying to get me in his car.
You don't forget that.
So I feel like I am going to, as long as I'm paying attention, as long as you go out understanding that there is a risk. And the simple fact of the matter is, if I walk in the middle of the day, there's still a risk.
Yep.
There was, I think her name is Jacine Galensky, I want to say. This happened about 96, 97. And she was out walking at a public park here. I live near Garden of the Gods. And I'm not walking there. So again, you can't stalk me there. But she was out for a walk. And once again, we had the vehicle bump. It was two guys in a van, or I think it was a van. And they bumped her. They ran into her. Made it seem like an accident and said, get in the van, we'll take you to the hospital, that sort of thing. So that was broad daylight. So are people not allowed to walk during the day? So there are inherent risks to everything we do. We have to measure those risks. We have to measure how prepared we think we are for those risks. And that's humans in general. That's not just women. That's men and women have to analyze those risks when they're going to do stuff. I just think that it gets pounded into women in a different sort of way. And that makes us more open to being interested in true crime.
Maybe not the best verbiage, but I understand what
Yeah.
So
and it's all but legal to run somebody over at this point, so that doesn't even matter. It's like the most dangerous thing for walking, the way I always experienced the world, was getting hit by a car. And
I got hit by a car?
No, I mean, I got hit by a cabbie once, but I was pretty wasted. Yeah. So I didn't
like
do
relaxed
anything.
It off.
It's kind of like it was a tap. It was a tap.
It was a love tap. I'd also go hiking by myself, and that is very frowned on as well. That's during the day, but again, I get told, oh, as a woman, you shouldn't go hiking alone. I'm like, anybody can get murdered on a hiking trail, and I'm not going to live my life by what y'all tell me I should or shouldn't do. I'm just prepared.
It's it's a wonderful way to find some headspace. Where do you find your creative headspace when starting a new book or a new short story?
So often I sit down to write when I've gotten the inspiration or something has triggered an idea. Could be something I read, could be some weird question. I ask a lot of weird questions in life. And so a lot of those lead to story things. One of those, I was a precocious kid. I wouldn't say I'm any less precocious as an adult in that sort of thing, to ask a question that somebody might not expect you to and try and get deep into it. My poor husband gets the brunt of that. If we're watching a movie or something like that, he knows it's gonna come. So he's gonna get asked these questions and be like, I don't know how to answer your questions. But I think it's clear now, right? I'm a big walker. And like you said, it's great for clearing your headspace. It's great for depression. It's great for a lot of things. It's also great for generating ideas or working on ideas you already have. And because you're shutting out a lot of other things, right? Like I'm lucky to have a bunch of parks near me where you can hike. There's even some rock climbing and stuff like that near me. It's one good thing. Colorado Springs has plenty of things against it, believe me.
Really?
But religiously and politically, we'll say.
Oh man.
This is the home of Focus on the Family and some groups like that. But it's absolutely gorgeous, and that's why people keep coming here, right? Like, it's beautiful here. You can hike in the middle of that. There's places in the city that you can hike because they've protected stuff. And so I like to just go out there and get into whatever headset I need to write what I'm going to write. But since I also am at my best at night, period. I mean, like, not just in terms of creativity, but energy and productivity. I'm writing in the middle of the night, and I can't hurt when you're writing horror and you're the only person up and the house is making its little sounds and the cats are moving stealthily around the house to make random noises.
It's true.
Yeah, sorry about the cat. She's persistent. Yeah, so embracing the night, just to be dramatic about it. Turns out I'm a little dramatic. This has been a struggle for me. I'm going to categorize people, as is my custom. You got larks, and you got the night owls. I'm sure there's someone else involved. I am not a lark at all. Now, where I come from, that means I'm lazy, right?
Yeah.
When I say where I come from, I'm talking about a physical state, right? So we can define it in many ways. If you don't do the 9 to 5, you are lazy, or you feel lazy. That perhaps this is who knows whatever it is. My natural state is at night.
Yep.
And one of my roommates was like, why don't you just embrace it? Embrace the fact that you wake at noon. And the rest of the country, because I'm in Los Angeles, the rest of the country is their day's over with, right? They're done. Just embrace it. Go ye therefore, rock and roll. And I have had a devil of a time doing that. So how do you do it?
So, man, this is something that I could definitely even rant about, right? Because I'm so tired of that mentality, but I understand, right? I've gotten it the same. And it's funny because anybody who's worked with me in any way is like, okay, you're not lazy. I'm very productive in the hours that I am productive. I get so much done. I have a day job, which is actually 2 jobs that were combined for me that I took separately as a contractor. And then they said, could you please just come work for us like a normal employee and do this? And I said, absolutely. But I was a contractor because my hours are off. It took me until my mid-40s to finally stand up for myself, is what I'm saying. And say, I am not going to take a job that requires me to be up at 8 a.m. because I can perform for you better if I'm doing it in my productive hours. And if you go back to the people who like to argue about it online, they're like, listen, there had to be cavemen that stayed up at night to guard the cave, and that's where we came from biologically. I have no idea. But I think that there is a purpose, and there's always night jobs, right? There's always things that need to be done at night, and those people then hit the same things that just a night person runs into, where business is conducted during certain hours, and a lot of types of businesses are open just for certain hours and stuff. So you're going to run into that. I do like that there are some 24-hour places, but it's also bad that I can go at like 3 o'clock in the morning and get some Whataburger or something. But
I want for the East Coast. Could you tell what a Whataburger is? I did not know until I came out here. Actually, until I went through Texas. Actually,
yeah, I was gonna say it's Texas based, right? I'm surprised it took so long to get to Colorado. We're really not that far, but Colorado and Texas are like so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fast food burger joint. I like the honey butter chicken biscuit is what I get because they start breakfast at 11 p.m. So I can go get me a honey butter chicken biscuit, and it's grilled.
Here's a question. Colorado has In-N-Out, right?
We do now. Yeah.
Okay. So which one's better?
Oh man.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to preface this is funny because I was born in California. My husband was born in Texas, and here we ended up in Colorado.
Yeah.
I prefer Whataburger.
DMZ. Huh? Do
I
what?
prefer Whataburger.
Dude, so this is... Ken, what do you think? What do you think?
I like
You've been out here
Astroburger.
too. Oh, fuck you.
It's a cop-out. You got to choose one.
I don't think I've eaten at either one of them.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think I've. I've had In-N-Out.
They support
Astroburger
you don't believe
is so
in.
much better than In-N-Out. It's not even funny. I mean, like, meh.
Really? All right, so you just pissed off half the country, but whatever.
I know.
Whataburger. All right, so here's the thing. I come from a place that has neither one of these things.
Yeah.
The Big Lebowski has In-N-Out, and so I knew about it. That was it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Hey,
That's how I knew what it was.
we have a
and out
Lebowski-themed restaurant here.
Well, yeah, you do, and you should go. God damn it.
I'm having my book launch there, so I'm totally going. So.
Oh, really?
It's new.
Tell us about your book launch.
I don't have a date for it yet. I'm still talking to them. But my book comes out March 26th, and I'll be doing a book launch at Lebowski's Tap Room in April.
Fuck yeah!
And we went there, and I was like, oh, this place is great. So they have
It's awesome.
8 varieties of the White Russian. You know why?
Of course. It's called the
The name
Caucasian.
of your book coming out
Yeah, sorry. Pimping it.
is called.
It's Mythstalker Wendigo Nights. It's actually urban fantasy versus horror. Yeah, urban fantasy is fantasy with elements of horror if you want to really boil it and make it simple. But yeah.
Could you say all that again? I'm a little bit drunk, please.
Okay, it's Mythstalker Wendigo Nights. It releases March 26th.
Mythstalker Wendigo Nights.
Wendigo Nights. Yeah.
Yep.
So I am part Cherokee. And so my character is also.
I see.
And in the series of books.
Oh, Mythstalker. I see.
She is a Mythstalker. So her job is to hunt down creatures of indigenous lore, basically. So this first one is about Wendigo, but there are a couple others that make that pop up. So in there, because she's surrounded by people who kind of do this also for a living, to take care of these problems that people don't acknowledge are real.
So is this coming from? Is this coming from your background of like creeping around at night on your nightly walks? I mean, is there some inspiration? Does she looks dangerous? She's got a gun.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't approach her. Like if I saw her standing somewhere at night, I would give her like
I would approach her. I would approach her.
And you would hit her with your car.
If I were single, I would approach her.
Look. So can you give us a little background of what inspired this book?
Yeah, just really it really came from I got frustrated because when you see people making movies and writing stories about creatures that are from native lore, they don't even try to get it right. Like they don't even try to actually match it up with what the actual lore is, and it drives me nuts. Having said that, since this book is about Wendigo, I love the movie Ravenous. But if anybody's seen that, it's fantastic. And I came across a paper from a professor, and that's one of the two movies that they use. The professor. Yep, I'm not going to remember the right tribe right now. It was not Cree. It was one of the Algonquian tribes, I believe. But anyway, she teaches classes on native lore, and she specifically addresses Wendigo because it's a huge part of Northern and First Nations lore. And she uses Ravenous, and she uses, I think the movie's just called The Wendigo. And it has the man who played the husband in the TV show, Medium. I don't remember his name. But anyway, she uses those to teach people and give them a concept of it. But anyway, it was frustration with that and just wanting to have this badass female character who's out there taking care of things that people don't want to acknowledge are real, but also to try to be as true to the lore as I could be.
I have 3 statements. I don't know if they're questions. Prepare.
All right.
First, the blanket behind you, which was stitched, potentially crocheted by whom?
My grandmother.
Indeed.
I'm in my bedroom.
Yeah, no, I love it. My mother has a couple of those. I want a story, goddammit. I want a story about it. All right. 2. Are you interested in consulting for people that are doing movies? Perhaps all the USC students who are into horror and all of that good stuff. Because, all of them listen to this podcast, but they might.
I would say that in general, I tend to not offer myself as a consultant on Indigenous matters because I feel that should be left to those who have more fully lived the life, as in I did not grow up on a reservation, for example.
Because you point a direction.
Is that? Yeah.
You point the right direction. Do you got the connections?
I could. I have some friends that might be willing to. Yes. So there is that.
So they should contact you in the event.
Maybe. It depends. Because here's the thing about consulting. I will say this, since I'm not the one who's going to be doing the consulting. Indigenous folks get hit up a lot for I turn down a lot of people because like I said, I will not speak for people who I think have lived in the culture more than I have. My character, I make a big point of my character being in the same situation as I am. I am not going to tromp over somebody else's ground that way.
Sure.
It would be inappropriate. But I am constantly asked, hey, will you, what is the word? It's not sympathy read. It's the same thing like if you have a character with LGBTQ, you would then want somebody LGBTQ plus to read this character, right? And I'm losing the term, but there is a term for it. I get it a lot. Hey, I have this Native American character. Will you read it? Well, first of all, what your character is Cree or whatever? Like, I'm not Cree, and so I cannot speak to that culture. So there is an expectation that if you're going to hit somebody up to consult on things, then you need to be willing to offer them compensation because this is taking their time and it's taking their energy, their emotional energy, their creative energy, etc. So I'm just throwing that out there.
If someone is going to hit you up, they need to pay for your time.
Oh, yes. But I will not be consulting on it. But I'm just saying, if I were to refer people to somebody, they should be willing to offer, if not to reciprocate in some way, they should be willing to compensate somebody for their time. It's kind of a big contentious thing. And that's why I throw it out there. But
no. I love it.
I'm constantly.
I'm not surprised by it. I'm not surprised, but I don't know about it. Because, I come from the Caucasus Mountains, man. All right, third thing.
Okay, I was going to say one thing. I even had some of my friends who were also Indigenous read my book for the, same thing. So
you did have them.
I did have friends who are Indigenous also read the book to say, like, hey, do you think I hit these notes right? Hey, do you think that I overstepped in any way? So even I had to do that. So just to throw that out there, like, I felt that was right. But
well, here in a second, we're going to talk about cultural appropriation because Ken brought it up. He'll move it to somewhere else. But my last thought. Writing, we're gonna go with a gender. Writing a woman protagonist.
How did you do that as a woman? How can you? No, okay, sorry.
Actually, it works perfectly fine. Now I'm gonna give you some background real quick. Of the GGP, Ken is the more liberal. I don't know if you've guessed it. I'm not. So please go full ham on everything you say. Go.
About what?
Exactly.
Go full ham.
writing. So you're writing a female character, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. Because I love to assume. I love to assume protagonist, and you're a female. That's not the gender. I don't know. What is my question?
I don't
know what your question is.
As yes, my
the identifications. Lord.
Your pronouns.
How does
you were going for pronouns?
Did you watch As Good as It Gets? That's the Jack Nicholson one.
Oh my God, that's a great one.
Yeah, the one where they ask him, "How do you write a woman?" Now, I'm not saying that that's actually a terrible thing to say.
That is a terrible thing to say. Yeah, I take away logic and
yeah,
why you gotta out me like this?
That's what I remembered.
But the reason it works though is because Jack Nicholson's character is OCD and can't feel. Yeah, he's horribly unattuned, which is why he can say that, right? But in reality, he's human, so of course he can be in the human condition. There's a deeper meaning. What I'm trying to say is, how do you write this character? And I'm leading, maybe not so subtly, into how do you write people that are not you? And I'm leading with my previous statement into, I don't buy into the cultural appropriation, and I don't buy into any of that bullshit. So I'm wondering your perspective on all of this. Go.
Wow. Are you trying to lose me, readers, or is that your goal here?
No.
I think that is one of his goals.
I'm the villain.
He doesn't want to sell any of his books either.
I'm the bad guy.
Okay, so go ahead.
It's a big bite. Attack it from any and every part you want. However.
So the whole write what you know is pretty much bullshit, right? Or we would have no fiction if everybody wrote only what they'd experienced in their lives. And sure, people have crazy lives, and so there could be some interesting stories, but we would not have speculative fiction at all in general.
So you've not killed any mythical creatures? You've not killed any mythical creatures?
If not at this time. So I grew up believing in Sasquatch because I lived in Oregon as well, and that's a big PNW thing, right? But
what's PNW?
Pacific Northwest. Sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so that was the thing I believed in when I was younger. Do I believe in it now? Boy, I want to. Isn't that part of what's okay? I'm
so sorry. Penn, does a Sasquatch talk?
No. Wouldn't it be fun if it did? Evil villain.
You know, it's.
I am a villain.
The sad thing is, I have a short film that features a Sasquatch that talks for about 15 minutes. So it's not
that's
made.
why he said it. But that's what fiction is for.
Yeah. Continue, please. I'm sorry, I keep on interrupting.
So, all right, cultural appropriation. I feel that this is an insanely tricky time. And again, I have pointed out that even for me, I have tiptoed and I have tried to cover my bases, right? Because I only represent a small portion of a certain community. And
it's
I
different
do not want
for
to
me. I represent like 90%. It's difficult being the majority, all right? It's difficult.
You're not the majority, though. You're so not the majority.
I can't help myself. I have to mansplain. Continue, Thor.
To mansplain. So, yeah, I can't even give you a right answer. That's the thing, is that I'm still trying to find my way through it. I do believe that you can be disrespectful, and that is what I would consider kind of the cultural appropriation. It being mocking, not doing your research and learning anything about what you're writing about would be like, oh my God, the number of people who wrote to me and said, my daughter's dressing up as Pocahontas for Halloween. Is that allowed? And I was like, allowed? What do you mean by allowed? Is that okay? Well, even if I'm okay with it, I'm one voice among a sea of many that could be hurt by it. You know, they have shown through studies that, ooh, here we go. I guess let's just get rid of all my reading. They have shown that mascots, for example, the native mascots do psychological damage and do cause harm for indigenous youth. So they've been looking into that, but a lot of people don't want to hear it. And somehow a mascot is more important than a group, an entire community of children's psychological well-being and place in the, so like, that's the thing. Everybody's going to have a different response to anything, and you can't speak for a bunch of people. What you can do, in my opinion, is to try to be respectful and do your research. And to me, that's how you avoid cultural appropriation type stuff, right? But as far as cultural appropriation, that one's tricky, and I wouldn't be able to answer that in the time we have. But
continue.
Okay, yeah. So I was just gonna say again, it's just a fine line, and it's respecting fellow human beings is what it comes down to for me. And I just don't want to cause anybody harm in anything I do, and I would hope other people would feel the same way. And that's kind of how I approach it, and would hope others would approach it. But my problem is with buzzwords, and cultural appropriation is a buzzword. It's been weaponized as they are.
It's been buzzed.
So that's why it's been buzzed. And my thing is, once they become a buzzword, they lose their power, and they blur the conversation. They murk the water.
Blurs.
Right? It does blur though, because suddenly it's an insult. It's in my opinion, it is used by people to shut down conversations instead of to have conversations. And I don't believe
Come to my side. Come to my side.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I do tire of things that become buzzwords and are like, okay, you use mansplaining. I mean, the whole definition of that was intended to be when a man talks to a woman who is equally or more qualified and explains to her the things she knows. And I have seen womansplaining. But mansplaining suddenly became about shutting down a man who talked about anything, right? Like if you happen to have a different opinion or something, or voiced an opinion when it wasn't asked for, maybe. That's what I see it a lot. I have seen so many women use it as just a way to shut down the conversation. And that's...
Everyone knows. Everyone knows. I am paying Shannon to say all of this.
But no, what I'm saying is these things to me are real things. It's just that they've been turned into something they're not and weaponized to shut down conversations. Right. But I would hope, again, that people would be conscious of what they're doing. And if they're writing about another culture or another... gender's trickier, like I wrote a lot of male characters, but yeah, it is. And I've read, of course, a ton of books by men. I would say that I had, at least until a certain point, read mostly books by men, especially in horror. That's why I did this top 100 horror list that I read. It introduced me to people I hadn't discovered. And like Margaret Atwood.
Where can we find it?
It was Nightmare Magazine. So I think if you search Nightmare Magazine and it was like top 100 horror, you might be able to find it. But if not, I think I could dig into my blog and find it from when I did it, because I was actively blogging then.
Is your blog on your website?
Yeah,
it is. My blog is my website.
Okay. It's the same thing. Okay. I thought it was on there. I when I was doing research on you, I definitely ran into it, so it's very findable. I did have a question about how you found the the creatures, or I'm not entirely sure. For and who's what is the lead character's name in Mythstalker Wendigo Nights?
Selena.
Selena. So the creatures that she runs into, you said they were native based?
Yeah, it's from native lore, basically things that have been around for a long time. Because even Sasquatch has a lot of indigenous origins, but it's not just an indigenous lore, right? It's U.S. lore, really. So that is what I kind of hit on.
So where is this lore coming from? What did you kind of?
For me, it was like oral tradition type stuff. It's just somehow the stuff that I happened across and heard about. So it's weird because, say, Wendigo, for example, is really a First Nations. It's Cree and related tribes, we'll say, because I don't want to leave anybody out and I don't want to say anything wrong about like pulling the wrong one, but it leaked down into the US. And so it started up there because, let me give a little background to Wendigo. The main way that one would become possessed by this Manitou or this spirit is cannibalism. And I've noticed a lot of native lore villains are based on taboo things because, say, a skinwalker, which would be Dene or Navajo, is somebody who often has committed a crime against family. So, for example, murdered a family member. So they hit taboo things that human beings do, but they take a certain amount of fault onto that person versus the way that I think European communities have long kind of used monsters like, say, a werewolf to excuse people for their worst acts. It's this interesting opposition that I've noticed between the two. And it's like a werewolf, you are a hapless victim, you can't control yourself, you're killed. But in native lore, they're like, well, they brought it on themselves, and then look at the bad things they're doing still. And it's very different how you're like taking responsibility for something. I find that interesting. An interesting difference there.
And is that and how does she hunt them down? Is it are there clues? Is it like a process?
I will say there's a mystery aspect to the story.
Yeah,
so
okay.
and she's trying to hunt down an originator of this, somebody who's brought this down on themselves and others to take that person, take them out.
Is she family to who, like, is she in the circle of what she's looking for, or like part of the family, or is she like a for hire?
She is brought in by her mentor, who is not family by blood, but is kind of family by circumstance in her past. And he brings her into the situation to track down somebody who is not like that is an outside, and he's going to do it. He's willing to pay her fee to do it. So she is brought in for hire by somebody close to her. And it is to save somebody close to her.
Sure. And is there magic in this world? Is this a magical thing, or is it like a suspension of disbelief, or does the story, like, is it firmly rooted in the reality of where we are? I mean, today, as human.
Urban fantasy kind of plants a foot on both sides of this line, right? Typical fantasy, say elves and that sort of thing, is firmly in a fantasy realm, right? But urban fantasy, the whole urban part of that is that it brings it into the now, often in a big city or something like that, a familiar place that can play up the city as part of the story. And so there are fantasy elements, obviously the lore itself. She also has abilities. So Mythstalker is something you're born to in this. And so there are elements of like, we'll say special powers, not like a superhero, but she has like enhanced senses and healing abilities, that sort of thing.
And is there a sex scene I mean, because she's very attractive, so I would imagine having a little spicy content in there.
I will say there is a sex scene in there, yes.
Nice. I mean, that's selling. I mean, that's selling in fiction right now. That's like we were talking about. It's very hot. So, like, is this the first in a series that you're planning?
It's intended to be the first in a series. So
All right.
she'll be going different places each time, chasing something different.
Ooh, I have a question.
Hmm.
Do you need someone to record an audiobook?
Why do you do that?
I do. However, and this goes back into my question. It's all about my questions. The idea of an audiobook done in the voice of a dude, but the audiobook was written by not a dude, and it's about not a
You
dude.
just said that for your villain. It was like it would have to be a female reading it.
A female. I mean, we have audio equipment. I could act like I do know some actors who are female who would throw it down in the event you need a voice.
You're in the right place for it. I did want to say, going back to cultural appropriation, that it is not limited to. I mean, we are from Appalachian, and if I wrote
Books weren't a part of Appalachia, okay?
if
We
I
are
wrote a book
appropriating all of the other peoples.
I live really close. My family is from Breathitt County. That's just can't help it. I just do it. My family's from Breathitt County, the mountains. We're hill people, and we if I were to write a book on mountain top removal or Appalachian life, like, it would not be accepted. Just like the hillbilly LG guy. I mean, like, he was not accepted by true hillbillies. Like, he was an outsider, even that, and he certainly brought a lot of negative press to it. So, like, I think we have terms like that. If I wrote that book, it would be a form of cultural appropriation because I didn't live that life.
You're absolutely right, and one would hope if you chose to do it that you would.
But I mean, it would be for altruistic reasons, because I feel like coal is, it sickens the people around the mountain. I know this is very.
This is where Ken and I disagree, by the way.
If you can't drink the water near a coal mine, you can't. It doesn't really bring jobs into town that pay very well, and it's just it is an endless amount of terror for everyone involved.
It's like the ocean.
Yeah, it's like the ocean. But I mean, we do that anyway, to like in every aspect of our lives. It is
So
the
cultural
horror
appropriation. Cultural appropriation. What, before I say the statement that I'm going to say, I'll just say the statement. Cultural appropriation is bullshit. All right. So as we had mentioned,
you already said that, but I'm going to ask you though, to my point that I made in response to it, how do you feel about that? Like, is it just the buzzword that turns you off? Is it,
yeah, and that I think that's that little tidbit that tidbit's the wrong word. That, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be eloquent. I can't be.
I mean,
that tidbit that you had was so good. That little turn of phrase of, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ken.
No,
the idea of, Shannon, when you mentioned something like it's a term that then becomes a buzzword and it loses.
Yeah.
What the entire reason that it was a thing.
Yeah, somebody says woke or canceled or incel. I mean, I stick by incel. I'm gonna keep that one.
I mean,
Well, they claim it.
A
They claim
group
it.
that call themselves.
They are a
that,
cult.
really, so
They're a cult.
yeah.
And there's a horror book coming out soon, I'm sure.
Oh.
I'm sure,
be.
Shannon Lawrence. This should be maybe about horror and incels. Oh my God. The idea of cultural appropriation. So my argument is a little flaccid. See what I did there? We are, oh God, I can't believe I'm about to say it. We're humans, we are. And best case scenario, in my humble est of opinions, is that we realize it. That we are humans, and the other could be someone else, maybe. Non-humans. let's attack the aliens that we don't know about.
You will.
That would be awesome if we could treat each other like humans. And part of that is, yeah, there's different cultures, so you experience them, and you're a white dude who moves to Japan, and you put on a fucking kimono, and you look like a goddamn goofball. And you are, in fact, appropriating that culture. Go fuck yourself. Yes, because that's what we do. If we have these roadblocks, these fences, we'll say, that say, no, this is our culture. Go fuck yourself. Your culture, my ass. You were born into that shit. It's not, you don't own it. You don't fucking own that. The whole point of what we're doing in this life is to understand, is to appropriate. We're in goddamn America, motherfuckers. That's what we do.
Yeah,
we appropriate.
We would have never had Vanilla Ice if, Even
Vanilla Ice apologized, okay? He apologized.
Maybe like throw out some Eminem or somebody who's like.
Yeah, no, I mean, Eminem never apologized. Eminem.
No, he should.
Like,
he will never.
Yeah.
And he was like, who did it for me? It was Vanilla Ice. He got me started.
Well,
I don't know. I really
listen.
don't know.
I like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles too, as well. Okay,
I remember that song. That was the epic song.
It was an epic song. When you were 8, or in your case, maybe 15.
I remember listening to it and thinking after the second time I listened to it, I was like, wait a second, this song is not as good as I think.
That's because you're smart. But I was 8, and I didn't have that feeling. So, Shannon, where I'm going with this is that's the reason I have a point of contention about it. What does the term, what's the benefit of the term? Cultural appropriation, what is it actually protecting? Or saying, hey, signal.
Origins, right? When you look at origins, it's meant to just bring awareness to an issue, right? A harm, something that it is problematic in some way. Then again, it gets blown up and it becomes this ugly alternate thing that will instantly shut down any conversation on anybody's part. And so, yeah, it's dead now, right? But as you said, your example of somebody moving to Japan and starting to wear clothes and stuff like that.
A corny white guy, specifically, by the way.
Corny white guy. It's always going to come back.
What does it matter? I mean, what if it...
Right.
I'm sorry, continue.
Be able to do it. Anybody should be able to do. I mean, look at the Fighting Irish. There are people who don't love that as a representation of the Irish who also came to the U.S. and they got beat up where they were. Then they came here and they got beat up here.
Yeah, but the Irish love it. The Irish love it, though.
Not all of them do.
Yeah, no, all of them. All of them do. So, hey, chat, if there's an Irish person who doesn't, if there's one of my roommates.
I mean, I'm Irish. I don't necessarily,
You're not Irish.
Green. I am Scottish, Irish, English.
You're not Irish. You can't be everything.
I'm like a 33%. Well, actually, that's not true. I'm a 20% Irish, 20% English, 20% Scottish, and like 40%.
Shannon, what are you when it comes to ethnicity and culture and all that good stuff?
Am I? I'm not. I'm also not. I'm not going to give out percentages because I don't know them.
Yeah.
but B, people are
German,
nasty
right?
about blood quantum stuff, and so that's nobody's right to know ever or
Yeah.
ask.
Oh man, that's
It's used as an attack a lot.
that's a horror thing in and of itself, isn't it? And that's
No.
the point. So I went to Dublin, and with one of my very, very sweetest friends, a guy named Waka. Very cool guy. He took me through Europe. Anyway, we went to Dublin, and we're rolling around. Everyone is incredibly nice until they heard my accent. And then they got all salty, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna fuck with you," which was awesome.
When they heard your accent trying to be Irish.
Well, yeah, of course. The entire time I was attempting to. Come on. Yeah. I was like, "Hey, what are the sites?" And they're like, "Oh, the fucking Spike." And I was like, "Spike?" I can't do an Irish accent. Like, what's Spike? In Dublin, there's like this big pylon. It's a big spike. And they're like, "Yeah, the fucking Spike over there." Anyway, regardless, I said, "Yeah, so, you know, I'm rather Irish. Look at me." And the woman, she said, "Oh, were you born in Ireland?" I said, "Well, no." And she said, "Oh, do you have an Irish passport then?" Well, no. "Well, do you know anything about Ireland?" I was like, you're a fucking leprechaun, you fucking...
Probably
And that
some
was-
fake things.
You see what I'm saying, though? She was like, "Listen, I understand that your ancestry is Irish, but you're not Irish."
Right.
She was not that polite, which was great.
Yeah.
It was great. And then she told me where the nearest pub is where I can go get some fucking Guinness and like some Lucky Charms. And I was like,
Yeah,
"Thank you."
all
You
people are
needed a
equal when it's
drink
time to
after
drink.
that. Yeah.
No, I'm just gonna say, again, for me, it comes down fully to what your intentions are and what effort you put into it, and whether you're being respectful or mocking and disrespectful for anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
I just want to belong, dude.
Americans are different about where we
Go
came
on.
from, right? Everybody knows where we came from. Everybody else is just like, "Yeah, I came from here. I'm from here. This is my place. I'm Irish because I'm Irish." And we're like, "I'm part Irish too." And I mean, my name is Shannon Lawrence. But my maiden name was German. So, like, I sound very Irish by name because my name is Shannon. And if you go to Ireland, I'm going to hear my name everywhere. It's an airport, there's a river, right. But I am not Irish.
And it'll be spelled with like 10 or 12 different letters.
Right? My ancestors, yes, I have some from Ireland. So yeah, we're weird in the U.S. about stuff like that, and I think that we
are.
Really differ from other places about other countries and how we look at that. I think part of that is if you're born in Ireland and you come from an Irish family, you have traditions, and a lot of that just kind of got tossed right up in the air here in the U.S. If you're already here, it got stolen, stolen from you because, it was illegal to practice like a lot of indigenous traditions and religious ceremonies and stuff until not that long ago. So it literally was stolen. Like, you are not allowed to do this or you will get in legal trouble. So that's what I mean by that. Not.
I understand. No Irish need apply. I get it.
But then when everybody came here, they lost those connections, and it's like we've passed down trying to keep those connections in some way. And so, yeah, I don't have answers to that, but we are.
So in a way, it's good to remember. It's good to remember who we are, and this is what I'm getting at. Like, all right. So one of my buddies, who I think is also your buddy, Ken, Mr. Bo List. You know what I'm talking about? Bo List is an amazing dude.
Friend.
It's fine.
I'm a bad friend.
He is a director. He's a director and a writer and all sorts of things. I'm going to throw lots of good shit at Bo List. If you don't know him, you should check him out. The dude rocks. Theater, drama, etc., etc., etc. Huge proponent for many things in Kentucky. Point. Bo was telling me a story. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, so it turns out that I am related," he says. As in, he is talking about himself. He is related to Muhammad Ali. Now, with Cassius Clay...
Is what we're getting at? Or
you're right there. So, Cassius Clay, there was this whole thing in the Clay family that they are related to Henry Clay. Now, if you don't know who Henry Clay is, perfectly fine. Henry Clay is a big dog in Kentucky.
Well, he was the person that basically stopped the first Civil War from happening. He came up with this thing called the Great Compromise, which basically said the South can keep having states and the North can have slaves, and postponed the Civil War for 15 years. He was Secretary of State at one point. I think he ran for president, and I believe he was killed in a duel.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's probably over coal. Anyway, the point is, come on, that was a throwback. Callback. Henry Clay, whether he's a good guy or bad guy, probably not the best of guys. To be completely, I think he died in 1850. That's just in my mind. Point is, he's a big deal in Kentucky. His name is Henry Clay, by the way.
Yeah.
So, as you might imagine, Cassius Clay, people were like, oh, well, they were just slaves, and so they took the name. Well, they were like, no, turns out we're direct descendants. Well, as it turns out, according to my good friend Bo List, which I'm going to throw his name down because he's that good, someone approaches him. They're like, listen, we need your blood. We're going to do a genetic test, and it's the last bit of research. And if the genetic hoodoo works, it turns out we can actually prove Cassius Clay and his entire family are direct descendants of Henry Clay. So, the obvious. Otherwise, it would not be a good story. Bo does the thing. Of course, it's approved. It's verified. He goes to Louisville, which is the proper way of saying the name of that city.
No, it's called Lowell.
Lowell. He goes to Louisville.
Lowell.
Goes to this sort of award ceremony. Call it a family reunion. And he describes, like Bo is sitting there, he's not crying, but it's obviously a moment of all these people. And when I say all, I mean all. And one of them is Muhammad Ali's brother, who I believe is afflicted with the same disease. I think it's Parkinson's, Anyway, by the end of it, the brother, whose name I can't remember, tells him we're family. Bo is the whitest motherfucker you'll ever meet. My point, we ain't white, y'all.
Actually, that's what I enjoy, and really awful racist people is when they discover, do a test and discover that they're not even pure.
We're just fucking human. You don't want to be pure. If you're pure, you're genetically flawed.
You probably got some genetic issues for sure.
Yeah.
That's right. I have a whole theory about accents that has no scientific basis. But because they're always like, why do people love accents so much? Why are accents hot? And I was like, I feel like that's a biological imperative. Your brain knows if they have a different accent from you, that it's probably not your cousin.
I like that.
So that's my theory with that.
That's nice. Yeah.
Which is neither here nor there and has nothing to do with what we're discussing. Okay. But
no, that does. Buck Mud says, I don't want to be pure. I'm not. And I'm not.
Not pure.
Buck Mud, I know for a fact, love horror. Shannon, I know you've written a ton of books and such. What is the thing that he should read? The first thing of yours that he should read.
I'd say Blue Sludge Blues and Other Abominations is a fun one. So it's a collection of short stories for me, but it leans more toward what people would consider the classic horror away from the psychological.
Like more stabby stab? Unless
more gore, more. And I'm not an extreme horror author, so I'm not saying like buckets of blood or anything like that. But yeah, that one's more along those classic lines.
So Buck is the person who introduced me to Chuck Palahniuk.
Oh yeah.
And I believe The Haunted, maybe is what it's called. I think it's a bunch of short stories. There's one specific one that he showed me, and I was like, holy shit. The cover of the book is a dude doing this. Yeah. Anyway, interesting stuff. So I wrote a tabletop role-playing game. Have you ever played those sorts of games?
I have not. I am. Well, I've played some loose ones that are like via cards, but
yeah, like what?
I haven't played Werewolf yet. I have that, but no, I'm trying to
play Werewolf. Werewolf is fun.
I have it really to play. I just haven't done it yet because I want to.
It's fun.
And I'm supposed to play. I have a friend who made a 50 at 50 list because she just turned 50, and she wants to play D&D. So I agreed to play
D&D. D&D is a good one. D&D is a good one. Everybody knows
it. Hasn't happened yet.
Now I'll say this about D&D. Of course, I think people should play because it's a good it's not a good introduction. D&D is like the calculus of tabletop role-playing games. It's just that everybody knows the word.
Right.
You know, calculus is actually complicated math, right? Arithmetic is easier, or it's a simpler idea. Arithmetic, plus, minus, etc. This is mansplaining. Now I'm mansplaining.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. So arithmetic, see, you can. My point is that everybody knows the calculus. It's like, oh, calculus, right? But actually, calculus is far more complicated, or not far more. It's just more complicated. D&D is it's the most popular, but it's actually a very complicated role-playing game. Like when it comes to math, very mathy. It's just everybody knows about it because there's a movie or two or three, which we only mentioned the one.
I also think the fact that it got like screamed about for being satanic or whatever during the Satanic Panic helped kind of solidify it in a way that other stuff, it got targeted for whatever reason. So then it becomes infamous.
So in the event you play D&D, what kind of character do you want to play?
Well, first saying that I wouldn't know all the character. I mean, I hear people talking about all the time, so I've kind of absorbed Bard and all this stuff. But so I have no full idea of what's available. But I would probably lean toward elves if that's a possibility, just because.
Okay.
I started out with Vulcan.
So in the D&D, do you mind if I go into a little bit of mechanics really quick?
Yeah.
Okay. And
you've never played one. Explain to me because I don't know it.
and you've never played one of these games, right?
Not like that, no.
Okay. Ken probably knows where I'm going with this.
Oh no.
I would like you to write down. I'd like you to write down, or perhaps remember, of your character. Okay? Your current character. It's an elf. Yes? Like a Tolkien-esque elf. Yeah.
I mean, I say that, but then usually if there's some sort of like mystic, semi-evil, magical woman, then that's what I
you can do that as an elf.
Semi-magical. I kind of want the leaning toward the evil a little bit is how I like to.
Indeed. And listen, this is bread and butter. Are you a Noldor? Or are you a Teleri? Or what's the other one? I'm stretching my Tolkien lore. Are you a
good elf or a bad elf?
No, these are not the good elves and bad elves. Are you one of the elves? We're gonna talk Tolkien. Are you one of the elves? I'm gonna piss everybody off. Who follows Galadriel, right? Against the Valar. Excuse me. You stay in Middle Earth, or do you stay in the Grey Havens? What do you do?
Good question.
So they go to Middle Earth. Chat, correct me if I'm wrong. They go to Middle Earth against the gods, Vala, because basically they want to help out against Morgoth. Okay, Morgoth is fucking everything up. Or Melkor, the super bad guy. Yeah, Sauron's boss is fucking everything up, and I want to say Galadriel and the rest of them go to Middle Earth because they're like, oh, we gotta like fight that fight or something. I could be wrong. Someone try. Well, are you one of the people that go against the gods? Or are you one of the people that stay at home?
Oh man, I admit that I have a little of the. I would never have been surprised to be diagnosed with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. So, admittedly, I would probably have been the one who didn't listen to what I was supposed to do. If
All right,
that tells you what you need to know.
If you had to, distill that,
I can't do a thing.
If you had to distill that down to a word or a phrase, what would it be?
I mean, rebellious seems.
Okay, rebellious. That's your first trait.
Okay.
That's your first trait.
Right.
All right. Who you are? You're an elf. What does that mean? If you had to distill it down.
I always seemed a little bit wiser.
Okay, so there's your second trait. Now I need something about what kind of weapon would you have?
Oh. I would like something large and sharp. I don't want just a sword. Like, I'm trying to think of the term for something that I'm thinking of, but
Ken, can you help?
I just think of it that sickle, or the
something with reach,
like a scythe.
The scythe,
like a big ass scythe for like cutting wheat.
Big ass one though,
Yes.
Like out of Final Fantasy.
Like some good damage. That's
okay.
What I wanted.
Okay, what kind of protection would you wear? You could wear anything. This is a game that.
So this could be like
anything.
Magic that you're using.
No, it could be anything.
Like a shield. It could be armor.
It could be anything. You could have Space Marine armor on it. Doesn't matter.
All right. I would want some sort of magical. I have sensory issues. I definitely would not be able to wear some armor without getting really annoyed. No chainmail. Maybe chainmail.
Would you have tattoos, or would you have some sort of trinkets?
Have tattoos.
I see. So maybe some like magic rune tattoos or something.
Runic tattoos.
I'm good with runic tattoos.
So Buck Mudd also introduced me to the novel series by Rachel Weisz and Tracy Hickman, I believe. Deathgate. If you haven't read it, it's super fantasy. It's very good. Back in like the 80s or 90s. Deathgate. It's. I don't want to. I'm an author, but they're better authors.
Oh, you're fine.
I read it very young.
Pretty good.
If you want to check it out, it's good. It's really good. Anyway, they got runic tattoos. Anyway, magical tattoos. So, let's say you're on a ship. Hey, Ken, give me a description of this ship in 10 seconds or less.
A creaky wooden boat that has lots of holes in it and is barely floating.
All right.
So
it's on the ocean. It's good ship. Shannon, who's on the ship with you in 10 seconds?
Who's on the ship with me in 10 seconds? 7, Lord.
6. God Almighty is on the ship.
Oh God.
Beard and everything. No. Who's on the ship with you?
I would say like
8.
The same folks as I am.
Yeah, so you have a whole bunch of
where you're losing your
Fae people. You got some Fae people. You're on this sinking ship. We're going to call it nighttime. And the ship is sinking. Are you near land or not? This is when a die roll might be implied or applied. Okay, so we'll do a die roll, sort of random chance. Let's say the die is rolled. Tell me a number between 1 and 10.
7.
Okay, so that was high, and I picked low in my brain. Turns out it's nighttime. You're nowhere near land. You're all probably going to drown.
I think I have gills. No.
Yeah, okay, indeed. So the third trait, let's say you have gills. Boom. But the rest of your friends don't. And there's how many of them? Tell me a number between 1 and 10. Ken.
7.
Okay, there's 70 of you.
Whoa.
They're all gonna fucking die except for you. So the action is on you. Maybe there was a creak in the night, an explosion. You all hit some sort of rock. Water is flooding in to this ship. 70 people strong. You have all age ranges. It's dark. You can't see in the dark. You know that you're going to a distant land, maybe to join up with a colony. Maybe there's a war effort that you specifically are going to join up with. But you're in the middle of the fucking ocean. Action's on you. What do? You have these 3 traits. Do you remember them? 1 has to do with you being an elf, rebellious. 1 has to do with you being wise. And then
wise,
1 has
rebellious.
to do... And then?
Oh, what was my 3rd? I have magic. Oh, gills.
Gills. Okay.
I have gills.
What do you do? Now, the idea of what you do is, what is the intention? How do you want to affect the fiction? You get to change the fiction.
So, like, if my goal was, we're sinking and there's 70 people, and I would like to save the ones that I can save, that would be that would be where I would be going next.
And then the way you go about that, the stepping off point is the trait you bid.
Okay.
And you got 3 traits right now.
So in this case, like I have gills, but I feel like that only goes so far, and I'd be having to use my brain to figure out the wise part.
You are
figure
correct.
out how I do the next part.
But you only need 1 bid to accomplish this goal. So what's it going to be? You got 3 traits. Which one does it start with? And we run from that.
Be going with the wise. I'm going to figure out. I'm going to noodle it.
Okay. What do you do?
Figure out a way to save as many people as possible.
This is your fiction. You have bid wise. You are wise. So how does the fiction bend to your...
I feel like it's cheap to introduce new magical things.
No, it's not. It's not.
Oh,
nope.
See, that's how it counters fiction right there. Like, you didn't introduce it earlier. You don't get to have it.
This is the prologue. Go.
Yeah. I would want to figure out a way to fix the ship because I can't influence the ocean. So
what would it be? You can't influence the ocean? You're a fucking elf.
Well, I can't.
You got gills. What the fuck?
It's an option.
Yeah, right. You swim in the water.
I'm going to call my half-guild brethren. And
clearly know about the ocean.
Right. So there is some aspect of me that is from the ocean. And so I'm going to call out for help.
How do you do it?
I am going
You're in the hold.
Telepathic. Oh, I feel like I would have to like call out like a tune that speaks to them.
Tell us.
What do you mean tell you?
Yep.
I call
So
out, like,
what
tell
does your
happens
character
in the
do?
next-
You look around, there's 60 some odd, because there's crew. There's 60 some odd people down in this hold who are sort of waking up as the water's
as you
rushing in.
speak,
They
it
look
says
to
water's
you
rushing in.
as your runic tattoos are alighting because, you know, your gills are going and shit.
That's right. And so I call out in the language of those people and my people. And it brings them, right? It resounds through the ocean and it brings those who are the closest, and they come and they help to shore up the ship. They have this great seaweed and they start plugging it into the holes, and and then we're able to start bailing. And this
is exactly the way that a game like this works. Now, we are playing Dreadlore right now. That is literally Dreadlore. Now, where dice would come in is I as the arbiter, as the game master or referee, I would say, okay, well, how far away are your brethren, sistren, and such? Yeah. Maybe you got to roll dice, and the number you get will determine how long it takes for them to come. So then you have to deal with things until then. Or perhaps I could say, okay, well, you're pretty far. Are you able to reach them? Or we could just go with a bid and say, oh, you're this person. Well, why do you matter? Why are they listening to you? Why would they listen to you? Because, you know, you're a little chaotic.
You bid wiser and you started to sing this enchanting song. I mean, so that projected your voice beyond just the edges of the ship. Maybe that projected, a nearby ship that was in your company to come along or something like that.
Like you're a chaotic being. Maybe you have left, since this is the prologue. I'm going to say you're kind of like Ariel from The Little Mermaid. Your father or your mother, whomever was in charge, didn't want you to be on this trip.
Right.
So why are they listening to you? You're calling for help, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we go. So maybe there's dice rolls, maybe there's not, and we build from that, and then we keep on going. So that's how a game like this works. Now in D&D, it works a little different. It works like you're a certain class. You're an archetype is a better word for it. So perhaps you're a warrior or a mage, wizard, or a bard or whatever. And so that's going to dictate what your numbers are and how high you need to roll.
Got you. So you have a predetermined.
We would love for you to play in one of our games.
Oh, I see. Okay. That would be fun. Yeah. I'd be up for that.
Yeah. Very narrative based. It's interesting to play. So Dreadlore is very much for, as I'm going to shamelessly plug, it's very much for creatives. It's interesting to play with someone who is a creative, because the way that your brain immediately goes is different than the way other people do.
Yeah, like the beauty of a prompt being thrown out and write it to a room full of writers. Every story will be different from the same prompt.
It's an adjective-based rules-light game, basically. It gives you hints of where to take these characters. I probably had 20, because I've been playing this for a while. I had like 20 different ideas of where I could go with this, just based off of that little, because it's yes-anding. It's like if I was the captain of the ship, nighttime, and it was sinking, I would bid my creaky wooden ship to maybe, because I was the captain, I would make it list over to one side where the holes are less, and it might be able to, or have all the elves move to one side, and it tilts the ship. I don't know if it works like that, but that's where a roll. Yeah, that's where a roll would. And I like the idea of being able to sing, because you're this mystical creature, and water is very transductive. Elves, whales sing in water, and their voice can travel,
right,
quite a ways.
So there's one person who runs this in a similar way to D&D, though. So there's one person whose job it is to like throw out and get people's feet out from under them, and
she is the arbiter. No, literally in the book.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So in the book, the arbiter is a woman, which was a choice. Which is explained in the book. The long and the short of it is this. To answer your question, in these kinds of games, there is a referee. And this person is going to play all of the non-player characters, or the antagonists. They're going to set up the world, and they're going to be, depending on the rules, the referee. The person who says, okay, well, this rule will apply, this one won't. This is how we're gonna mess with the situation, etc. For example, if you're on an airship, right? Well, what are the physics of an airship? How fast are you really moving? If you're moving as fast as, a jet plane, well, how are you breathing? Right? Because the wind is moving pretty fast by you. Like, there's a lot of these physics, and you're always going to have a player who's like a physicist. He was like, well, actually, hold on a second, if you banked. And it's like, I love that mug.
It's like being a con panelist. There's always somebody in the audience who's like, I know exactly everything about the thing you just said. And you're like,
exactly. And so it's important to have, this is where the buck stops. A person who says, yeah, sure. there's also magic in this game, so
Right.
physics will work a little bit different on this. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the crystals. The crystals allow for
Right, the
airflow
crystals.
to-
It's the crystals.
it's the
They
crystals.
allow for it.
I think the first one of the first Tim Roberts led a game that I played that had airships in it, and I don't think we had any problem breathing.
No, well, you can ignore it. It's like when the adventuring party goes into the dungeon and everyone's doing shit and you're like attacking shit and, you know, opening up the chests of gold and such. And then some asshole is like, how are we seeing? Wait, hold on a second. Aren't we in the earth? Oh yeah. Oops.
Oh, where's the light?
Just a
coming
second.
from?
How are you carrying so many weapons?
Yeah.
Andrea.
I'm
Okay,
gonna-
so
I'm gonna
this is a
send
question.
tips.
This is a question I got for you, Shannon. In the world, respecting the rule of that world, right? So you have a
Yep.
horror element. There's usually a fantastic element too, right?
Mhm.
How do you make sure to respect the rules that you've laid down, and how do you lay down those rules anyway?
Yeah, so that's something to consider, right? Because we kind of had set rules for vampires, right? To use one
Mm.
that I think everybody's going to be familiar with.
Yeah, sparkly.
And
Right, they sparkle in
they
sunlight.
oh god, not the sparkly vampires. No. Okay, but that's the thing. If you break it, you have to find a way through the telling, right, to let people know you've broken that rule and that they expect that rule to be different. Because otherwise, and I can't think of an example, but like I've watched things with vampires and I'm like, well, that's not the rule. And you didn't establish that that rule was different in this world. And that's a failure on the part of the person who created it, right? Because if there is a trope that is steadfast, and you have to be familiar with it. If you're writing in a world, you probably are familiar with those tropes and rules, right? Just kind of if you write, you should also be a reader.
Mm.
You kind of know the rules, you kind of know how stuff works because you have also experienced that from other people of varying skill sets and all of that. So yeah, you need to know what your rules are kind of going in. And if you hit one that you didn't consider, then you need to consider what the expectations of the reader or watcher or whatever you're creating are. And figure out, because if that's something that you needed to establish, then you have to go back and establish something about that. You have to establish that rule break. Because otherwise, people are going to come in assuming there are certain rules. And it's frustrating if those get broken and you don't understand why, basically.
Right. You start losing faith in the fiction.
Yes.
That's something as a storyteller, and when I say that, an ST is called, you know, because we're creative about it in role-playing games. An ST, a DM is a dungeon master. That's a trademarked term.
Yeah,
Anyway.
they'll come after. They'll find you if you say it again.
They'll get you, man. So, as an arbiter in Dreadlore, I think it's something to always be conscious of. Your audience, if you're live streaming, is whomever decides to fall upon your podcast, but your other audience are your players. And there's definitely moments in like the current game that I'm running. It's a horror investigation game.
Ooh.
And unfortunately, our buddy Drizzle is not on here. He's our horror guy. We ask him about horror. He does haunts and that kind of stuff. But there are times that the cast, including Ken, will be like totally on board. And they're like, oh yeah, that monster. Yeah, I get it. But there's moments where they're like, wait a minute. Are you just trying to fuck with us? Are you breaking your own rules? And it's a big no-no. It takes everybody out of the fiction.
Sure.
And I think in a book, you probably throw away the book. You're like, nah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, if you did this, what else are you going to do?
Right.
Reading Stephen King was always tough for me because I just hate the way he writes. Like I hate it. Personal thing.
Like the voice of the story, or
The voice of the stories, his story, like his technique, and it makes sense because he writes so much. I just can't get into it because it's just like come on, this is like, it's like doing my taxes.
And that's the thing you can't overcome, right? Like you will never like.
I mean, I don't care what happens in the story. I can't do it. Like I like Asimov. I think that he writes well.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I'd like,
but he's not a horror writer.
Well, I mean, robots are terrifying.
He was my intro to sci-fi too. So, of course, iRobot is the one that I think probably brings. That is the one, kind of.
Did you see the film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It existed.
That was fine. Yeah. It was not like, it was not even. That's not a story.
No, they created Will Smith's character because they needed that character.
Right. So it drives me nuts when they do that. I'm like, make this a standalone and don't make it belonging to something that already has like a property and a fan base, and then you probably would do just fine with it.
Yeah, they should have called it Mean Robots.
Ooh, Star Wars.
You mean like Star Wars or Star Trek Discovery or any of the fucking anyway? No, but
a lot of
you're
the things where they shoot themselves in the foot from.
Here's the thing. They are it's a multifaceted thing. Why would I make a movie called Star Place that no one's gonna watch when I could be like, wait a minute, I could get all these motherfuckers who will dress up and they will think that Daisy Ridley is hot. We can get them for at least 2. Come on. And there's the whole Gen Z, whatever previous then that's coming up. They'll watch it. It's a money.
I know.
It's not good storytelling.
Here's your marketing aspect is, do I want to get those first timers that come in and give me all their money to begin with because it's a property that exists, and then they loathe me, but they already gave me their money, so I don't care? Or do I want an ongoing fan base to love what I created? And I mean, no matter what, somebody's going to hate it if there's an established base. But somebody's going to be mad about what you do.
I'm watching
people argue about like DC and Marvel who actually have read all the comics, because that's when it really gets to the nitty gritty there.
Oh yeah,
it's painful.
And I confuse DC and Marvel all the time, to the chagrin of no one.
Do you? I think we should wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of last thoughts that you want to get out there before we
skedaddle?
Man, we talked about
other things than podcast. I mean, is there other things than podcast? I mean, I don't even know.
All we do is podcast.
Do you have like, is there an attention to like horror that you want to see other writers or authors? Is there a detail that you think is missing?
Not something that's missing. I will say though, to open your mind and broaden your horizons when it comes to horror, instead of following one niche or another, because there's a lot of great stuff out there that doesn't fall under this was written like a Stephen King book or whatever else. And there are a lot of definitions of horror. So just quit sticking it in a box is what I would say. And you're going to find a wealth of other stuff that you're going to enjoy. That would be a final thought.
And when should we expect not this book, but the sequel to this book?
Oh, man. I would say probably next year.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the event you need audiobook people, I am in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of people I know who would love to do it. So, just so you know, don't get AI to do it. Oh my God.
I will. Don't worry. I will not. AI will not write for me.
Yeah.
Also, if you need,
will not create my art, and it will not speak for me in audiobook form. So.
If you need any kind of media production, there's this one company called Replay. Yeah, Couchfire Media. Right to our
At the top of the show.
Shannon Lawrence, thank you very much for being on. I am going to ask you one more question, though.
Do it.
Two more. One, what were you drinking tonight in that massive mug of yours?
It's boring though. It's just water.
Listen, water's
I'll go
great.
drink
Water's
after
healthy.
this. I'm gonna no.
Healthy.
I'm gonna have my margarita to enjoy. No, it's just 100 ounces of water right there.
God damn.
Good.
Second,
It's like
and this will throw it out. Oh my god. And any aphorism you might have, or saying, or quote that you want to make up or recount, like a cheers.
cheers. Go forward and scare people. Let's do
I
that.
like that. I like this. I've got two. Write about what you know. Write what you know is bullshit. that's a Shannon Lawrence, and then go forth and scare people. All right, I like that. Thank you very much for joining us.
Famous final words. is the right? What you know is bullshit. That's his last words.
It has been a pleasure. You've been one of the more creative and interesting people that we've had on here, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think
anything?
you might be our first female guest, so
I don't know. Someone, yeah, you're right.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
gotta mix it up a little bit.
Right.
I mean, I like people from around the world. And you are not the first person who has native First Nation heritage
awesome.
on our podcast.
Who was the other one?
Who do you think?
I have no idea who.
Jazzy Cabbage.
Oh, Jazzy. Yeah, if you like video games and that, Jazzy is crazy. They are a
Jazzy
crazy
Cabbage.
person.
They are
Crazy person. Always streaming, always kicking ass, and such.
Good
All right,
stuff.
we out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being a part of this presentation podcast that we do every Thursday. Thank you to our Patreon members. Please join or consider joining our patreon.com/dreadlore. Thanks to Roberts, Daniel Hulker, Nostalgic, and Natalia.
Oh, piece of shit.
Cline. Production by Couchfire Media.
Natalia Cline.
As well as art, and Toiribile Productions.
Couchfire Media is pretty
brings
cool.
a lot of the content
Yeah,
and madness and all of the joy
those guys
that we are experiencing. Until next Monday.
Monday.
Yeah, for
Monday.
You gotta join the Red Writ next. It's not the Red Writ. It's Into Space. This has been a production of Geeky Gamer Podcast.
Geeky Gamer Podcast.
Bye.
Thank you, Shannon Lawrence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon Lawrence.